Hello, and welcome back to Plateau TV, which is apparently a quarterly show now. we, I, we, uh, we came back after a long hiatus and went immediately back into another long hiatus. So, thank you for enjoying this whenever you do, since I'm sure we'll have maybe like 3 followers watching the live show. But life intrudes. As usual, I'm joined by my good pal Jay. How you doing, man?
Doing well. How are you?
And our team mascot, also pal Orc.
What's up, dog? Shit.
What's been going on, guys?
I don't know. I got some McDonald's Uber Eats to me, so I'm gonna eat that real quick and enjoy those memes while they last. Ba-da-da-da-da. Hang out, suck balls.
Is that still their song?
They have a new song. They're like, "Let me get a McPick 29."
I caught my wife like humming that song a little while back, and I remember it made me laugh so much that she was just
my god, what a keeper you
song.
have! Holy shit, I'm in McDonald's. Jesus Christ, throw a little fucking Super Meat Boy in there. You're good to go. That's wife material. Good job, Bruce.
How about you, Jay? What have you been up to?
Oh man, not much. We're getting to the swing of summer here. Got spring TV. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about there.
Yes. And it's actually been a pretty good, I think, spring for TV. Lots of like the mid-year stuff. I do want to talk to you guys a little bit about Roseanne. I don't know whether you've seen it, but I've been kind of keeping up with it. The Americans, which I don't know that we've ever talked about that one. I don't know that you guys watch it. I think it's a pretty great show, and it's in its final season. But I actually haven't been keeping up with the final season that much. So a great show that I'm not watching as much as I should. But yeah, it's been kind of a funny spring too, because we usually participate over on the Sausage Factory, and just life intrudes, man. Different work obligations, other things getting in the way. So definitely glad we could give the nation something to hold on to.
What are we going to give them to hold on to, Easy?
I don't know. What do you want to give them to hold on to?
You know what I'm saying?
a big long meme.
Sausage.
Yeah.
From McDonald's. Ba-da-da-da-da. We're off for 5 weeks.
Don't go back to the McDonald's well again so soon. That's a callback for later in the show. It'll be funnier.
Well,
amateur.
Well, okay, we went to fast food, and now we'll go to Friday the 13th down that street. Okay, so so Patrick's came out, good stuff. His was going to be on the show, but he's abandoning us.
Yeah.
At least he's not like CK though, so that's a win, right?
Yeah. Yes, the Friday the 13th game patch comes out, and in tune with the idea that we always have to talk about Friday the 13th on anything we ever do. Which I don't know if that's true, because last time I've watched you and Cole, Jay, I don't know that you've brought it up, or at least I don't remember it explicitly. But I do have a Friday the 13th topic I'd like to discuss today, so keeping that alive. Yeah, but And Orc, I'll start with you because it's usually a short conversation. But what's new that you've been watching lately? Which pilot have you checked out lately?
None really. I'm in summer gaming mode, and I really haven't even seen too many movies or pilots. I've seen a lot of stand up. I watched Tom Segura's his 3 specials that he has out.
Yeah.
And those are fucking hilarious. So was watching those, and then other than that, I've just been playing. Or the top 5 games I'm playing. I know this is TV related, but what I'm doing. So Call of Duty, Friday the 13th, Hearthstone, Dota 2, and Overwatch. I'm really enjoying Overwatch a lot more than I used to. And this weekend's free from Friday through Monday, I think.
Oh, nice.
Yep. So, but no, not too many pilots. I've been. I don't know. It's different watching Lie on Your Side, because I can't I'm trying to look at the cinematography and shit, and it's just like, fuck. But I don't even know what the last one I watched was. Oh, Cobra Kai. That's one I did watch. Thanks, Jay.
Oh, you watched it all? Good.
No. Just the pilot.
Come on, man.
What are you, crazy, Jay? My God.
Dude, do I look like
Yeah,
a nerd to you? Jesus Christ, what the fuck?
that was definitely one I wanted to talk about.
That I mean, I haven't. I should have just watched the whole thing because it's short as shit, and each episode's 30 minutes, and there's only like 10. But that pilot, oh my god, the guy who he crane kicks, whatever that actor's name is, just seeing his like where he is 30 years later. Oh my god, it's funny.
Yeah, I was watching some of the behind the scenes, or the making of or whatever, and they actually had some footage that they shot that they didn't use in the original film that kind of shows it from I don't remember his name in the show, but from his perspective, Johnny. Yeah, it's basically it shows that entire the final fight between him and Daniel from his perspective, and kind of puts an interesting twist on it. Makes him look like a lot less of an asshole. And,
but the last thing I'll say is the main thing I've been doing is like, should I watch X and X pilot? Blah blah blah. But then I'm like, the Six Tremors movie's out and it's on Netflix, and I'm like, well, I'm a fan, but I don't know how soon I want to watch this. But yeah,
What is it?
For the folks at home, it's called Tremors: A Cold Day in Hell. I know what you're referring to. I haven't seen it, but I've seen it like available. And what's your hesitation? Why don't you want to watch it? Jamie Kennedy doesn't do it for you?
Every time I just I want to hit play, and I'm not browsing through Netflix adding all the shit I'm gonna watch that I'll never get to. I just I don't know, it's gonna be good. 5 was a big step up from 4. Not that was saying anything, because 4 was the biggest pile of dog shit I've ever seen in my life. But I don't know. I'll get to it. There's
I
probably
didn't hate 5.
10... What?
I said I didn't hate 5.
No. I thought 5 was a decent movie. I mean, but Tremors 4, the one in the West, what's the prequel? That was one of the shittiest movies. Oh my god.
Yeah.
1 through 3 and 5 I can watch. 1 and 2 are really, really fun to watch. And then the 4th one, whatever the hell it was, Bert goes back in time, fucking.
Well, I think it's just a flashback. I think it's just in the old. What you're just seeing, that this is the graboid problem has existed longer than we knew.
But Bert Gross is a Highlander, which they didn't tell you, and that's why he lives until 1990, so he can be with Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward. So that's the meme. That's the meme.
Right. See, we're talking about Tremors. We can just keep Friday the 13th off our plate for as long as possible, I think.
On that note, why do you guys think that God, was it Sci-Fi passed on the series with Kevin Bacon?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Because I don't. Did you see the trailer, Orc?
For what the series with Kevin Bacon?
So Sci-Fi Network was developing, and I guess they shot a pilot. For a new Tremors TV series. And I say new because there was a Tremors TV series that followed the original movies. I don't know whether you knew that.
Yeah, there was the first 1 or 2 seasons is on only DVD only. You can't watch it streaming, it's not on Blu-ray. But I remember going into Times Square back in 2000, 2001, and there was a tremor coming out of the side of a building with all the little tremors coming out, and I was like, "Whoa, it's really happening!" And it just fucking dies and bombs after.
I'm a Tremors fanboy, so I really do need to go back and watch all of those. I think I did see a few on TV. I don't remember it being that great.
I never knew that about you. Yeah, I think I watched the first so if I remember correctly, the third Tremors movie came out, and I think the third Tremors movie was kind of like a backdoor pilot kind of thing for the series. Kind of like it. I think a lot of the people that were in that movie ended up being in the series, and then that came out not after it, and it was just a mystery of the week and various things. But anyway, the what we're referencing, Orc, is that they made a pilot for a new Tremors series, which, in terms of the trailer that I saw, and it would have starred Kevin Bacon too, so it was actually coming back to it would have been a Kevin Bacon led project. It would have been a complete and utter reboot, nothing since the first movie happened. Which I'm kind of, even though I thought the trailer looked good and the series would have been kind of interesting, I'm kind of glad they didn't do it, just because I don't know. Why wipe out all that history? And again, they just made like another sequel, like you're talking about part 6. Feels kind of shitty to me. Like I'm kind of getting annoyed with these like I'm gonna come back to a franchise and we're gonna reboot everything. It's like Kevin Bacon. Why didn't you be in Tremors 2 through 6?
They've been
Stop
trying to
showing
get
up.
him in every Tremors movie.
Yeah, it's like don't just show up and it's like, oh, I want to start over from scratch. It's like, screw you, dude. Like, because Tremors 2 is pretty good. So's Tremors 3. We can, again, we'll debate what comes after that, but they're decent popcorn movies, I think. But yeah, that's and Sci-Fi Channel decided not to go ahead with it, and I think that's it. Like, I don't think there's any prospects that it would go anywhere else, unless you've heard something, Jay. But I haven't heard that.
I'm not sure. I just think it's strange considering the absolute crap that they put on that channel. They didn't go with this. I don't know. Maybe it was really bad.
Well, I think they're actually trying to get better because isn't The Expanse one of their shows? And that show they just canceled it, but The Expanse has like a rabid fan base, and it always was critically got a lot of kudos. I haven't checked it out yet, but I always heard good things about that, and I think Amazon's picking it up.
Oh, yeah, no, I've seen some good stuff on that channel.
I've also heard that Krypton, which I was very cynical about, turned out to be pretty good.
Is that the Warner Brothers is doing that, like on the Warner Brothers network?
Yeah, Krypton. It's a prequel. Well, that's the thing. Like Krypton, it's set like a generation or 100 years or so before, like Superman's even born and Krypton explodes. And so originally it was thought to be just like a prequel, but in fact, once it premiered and once the story started kind of coming out, it is a prequel, but there's like a time travel element where like a character from the future is trying to like come back to Krypton in the past to save Superman in the future. And there's just I've been reading all kinds of like crazy stuff about it. Like just that sounds interesting that, I might check it out at some point.
Sure. Yeah, I was seeing some
if that's your thing
about that.
Yeah. But what have you been watching, Jay?
Yeah, I've been trying to find a solid list here, but I can't really find anything. The most recent thing that I liked a lot was a show on Netflix called Safe. Just came out. Michael C. Hall. Is that Dexter?
Oh, that show. Oh, the name flew by me. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's
very
Michael,
generic.
Michael C. Hall or whatever. Yeah.
A very, very generic name, but it's a good show. I just kind of watched it on a whim. I don't normally watch a lot of that stuff on Netflix, but he was in it, and I was like, cool. I've kind of missed him. I liked him a lot on Dexter, but he's actually playing a Brit on that show, which is kind of odd at first, but you really get used to it, and you don't notice it at all. I think he does a great job. I like seeing American actors take British roles because they do a hell of a lot of it in America.
Yeah, let's go back across the pond. I was looking at like the cast of Infinity War, and I was like just counting out like all of the British actors, and there's so many of them. It's like half the cast is British and sorry, not British, but like because the Chris Hemsworth is Australian.
Yeah. I was going to say that.
But still, there's a lot of non-American talent.
So to keep it PC, they're not American.
They're not American.
Yeah, they're not American.
I've heard a lot of theories as to why that is, and a lot of the older actors say that the younger generation of American actors, like, they don't want to go through like the old school, like, theatrical process and all, and they still do all that over there in the UK and stuff. So
yeah, they don't. I mean, it's good though because for the ladies, you don't have to blow Harvey Weinstein, so that's good. Sorry. While I have the floor and all the memes are taking place, Jay, that was funny. Fuck you, laugh. But he's being like arrested in New York, and then on top of that, good news for me at least, because I like Disney, but some of the memes that they do sometimes are kind of a pain in the ass. Sorry, multitasking, and I suck at it. But I guess Netflix's media division is bigger than Disney currently. Just overtook them in terms of like revenue and subscribers and money they make.
Yeah,
so that's good. But it's only the media though, so that's.
I mean, the new content they put out, like, it seems like on a daily basis, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, there's something new.
I mean, there's a lot of good original shows on Netflix, man. Like even stuff like the Santa Clarita Diet. I mean, it's it's not great or anything, but it's pretty fun to watch.
I love how it's just always random shit that people bring up too. Like one of you guys will be like, "Hey, they brought Gilbert back," and I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" It's like Netflix original Gilbert 5 seasons.
There was just an article about that too. That part of why Netflix is so aggressively doing that is it's so much cheaper for them to take what they've produced and then just air it. Is so much cheaper than like paying the license to air, all the various CW shows or NBC shows or whatever stuff they've picked up that they're kind of running on that they don't own it, so it's an interesting model, and I really am mad I never bought that Netflix stock back when I was thinking about it.
Oh man, it's working for them because I mean it's almost like a joke, like how quick they put stuff out. It's like, oh shit. There's like 7 seasons of Fuller House. Like they just started that shit like 2 years ago.
Jay is the money guy on the show in terms of knowledge, but I will say if you literally want to make a shit ton of money, Netflix, Amazon, and Apple are the 3 companies you want to invest in because they're going nothing but up, just all the way up.
Yeah. I saw. Well, I don't want to get too nerdy here, but I actually just saw though that even though Amazon makes like buku bucks in terms of, Jay, keep me honest on the terms. Like Amazon makes a lot of money, but in terms of profit, they don't they make a lot of money, but they don't make a lot of profit. Whereas Apple makes like insane profit, and so like Apple is so much more profitable than like Amazon is. I remember just reading something about that, and I just thought it was really interesting because everybody seems like in like the digital world, in the retail world, everybody's running scared of Amazon, and I think to some extent maybe they should be, but it was just interesting that
think about this
despite that.
So Putin doesn't report taxes, and he's probably the richest man in the world, and probably has $250 million sitting to his name, but he doesn't pay taxes and he kills everybody, so it's fine. If you run against him, So I'll be dead in a week for saying that on a hangout that no one watches. Kappa, kappa, kappa. Okay. But as rich as Bill Gates is, Jeff Bezos is worth $30 billion more than Bill Gates. Think about that for a second. $30 billion more. And then Apple this year will be the first $1 trillion company. Trillion.
Yep.
Like, just let that sink in for a second.
You're talking about their music bullshit? I don't know if that's going to take off.
The Apple brand, just all of it.
Yeah.
Because like Spotify, Pandora, and Amazon Music are all big right now, right? And a lot of people use those for music services, or they just use YouTube for free. But Apple's gonna launch their version of Spotify, and just because of how many people like Apple and their stuff, it's gonna surpass like Spotify in like a month, like easily.
Yeah.
So you're saying just because they are Apple?
Yeah. Just because I forgot how big Apple was till I was in Boston, and everybody had a fucking iPhone and an Apple Watch. I was like, holy shit.
Are you an Apple person?
No, not. I'm trying to reduce the hate because I like iPhones are decent and iPads are okay, but as for desktops and laptops, they're good fat tops. They're good for that. But
when someone hands me an iPhone, I'll take it and I slam it on the ground as hard as I can.
Oh, Lonely Island, threw it on the ground.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
No, what about you, Eric? Are you an Apple user?
I have never had an iPhone. I've always had an Android. I did have a MacBook when I was in grad school, and it was because I got it like refurbished somewhere. And I do have to say, like from a reliability standpoint, I ran that laptop into the ground. Like it lasted. It was pretty reliable. At one point, its performance was really suffering, but I just swapped out the hard drive for an SSD, which just pretty much brought it back to life for like another few years. And so I'm not like an Apple hater. If anything, I'm like an iPhone hater. I really don't like how like Apple takes this very aggressive position on like the phone, and it's like really dumbed down, and it's like, oh, it's just so easy.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I mean, yeah, but I don't know. I've never thought iPhones are terribly like, because my wife used to have them, and she'd be like, oh yeah, hey, can you like look this up for me? And I'd be like, I guess it's like you just got to hit the home button for everything. That's the solution. So yeah, I'm not like a hater, but I do prefer Android. I think they're a little more flexible. And I think even when you look at like what are like the top phones and what are people interested in, what performs the best, you know, the iPhone's obviously a solid product and it's up there, but you know, they have not been like the leader of the pack in terms of like the best smartphone in years.
Right.
You know, it's usually like, you know, Galaxy S this, LG something, you know, there have been other providers out there that they're turning out good products.
Yeah. I think it's kind of changing now, maybe a little bit, but before it was kind of a status symbol thing. Like, oh, Apple's the best. I've got to have an Apple.
Oh,
Yeah.
without a doubt. Without a doubt. It was almost more of a cultural, like, yeah, it wasn't even like, was the phone decent? Sure, yeah. But it was like, oh, I have an iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was
Oh,
that
you
kind of
hubris.
It's like,
yeah.
But you could pay like $400 less and have something probably better.
Right. Right. So yeah, I'm not a hater, and you know, it's like what you said, Jay. It's like, well, if someone hands me an iPhone, I'm gonna smash it. If someone hands me a free iPhone, like I don't know if I'll smash it. I'll be like, okay, thanks. I'll go sell this on eBay for $1,000.
No, I'm saying like, here, look at my baby pictures. I take it, I slam that motherfucker on the ground.
It's I don't know. There's a certain hubris I think that Apple has, and sometimes like you know you talk to their employees and there's just it's a little bit culty. And in fact, before I got like my career path in life could have taken a very different turn, because before I got like my first real adult job, I interviewed at this place and they didn't hire me. They basically said no. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just kept interviewing, and I did interview at like an Apple store, and I was just like going in there to be one of their associates and, you know, see where that took me. And the same day I had that interview, I actually got a call back from my, you know, the job that had turned me down, and they're like, oh, wait, no, actually, we do want you. And I actually was there for like 5 years, and way longer than the person that they hired first, because that's what happened. There was one slot open and they picked someone over me, then another slot open, and so then they just, you know, oh, call him back. And then I just take a lot of pride in the fact that the person who they hired over me lasted like 3 months and I was there 5 years. Anyway, I bring this up only to say that in the interview process, like just the way they talk to you, the way they talk about like the product and the stores, you feel a little bit like they're going to have you drink some Kool-Aid in the back room, like if they hire you. Like it's very strange. But again, trillion-dollar company, they're doing something right.
You know, they make those phones for like 50 cents. They get like Chinese children to make those things for like a quarter, and then they sell them for like $2,500. So that's their profit that you were talking about earlier.
The funniest thing is like the S9 and S9 Plus are like the best Samsung phones currently, and the Pixel 2 is really good and it's way cheaper. But
I have
the
that.
iPhone,
that's my phone.
Pixel 2, you have it? That's
I do.
dank. But like even the iPhone 10 or the iPhone X, like it's $1,000, yeah. You know, if you can afford it, that's cool. But I think the iPhone 8 Plus or 8S, or I think it's the 8S, is a better phone, and it's like $200 cheaper. Have you looked into that at all? Or yeah.
Well, the reason I went with the Pixel 2, it is a really good phone, but there are like additional benefits you get with it because of the whole. And again, this scares some people. I like it. I like the interconnectivity of Google products and the fact that it connects out to all kinds of other things too. And so if you have a Pixel, you get free like photo service, meaning I take all these pictures on my phone of like, you know, my kids and my cats and all kinds of stupid stuff, and I just back them up instantly, and that storage up there is free. Like I can take as many pictures and videos and in HD if I want to, and it's free. And then I just clear out my phone and it keeps my performance good. And it's it's kind of like a fringe benefit that's I think really valuable.
Absolutely it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Backup like HD video. Yeah, you definitely have to pay for that.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. The first phone I had, or the first smartphone I had, was the Google Nexus 1 or whatever it was called.
Wait, wait, Google Nexus or the Droid, the original Droid?
It was the Google Nexus.
Google Nexus, okay.
It was really cool. It had a little roller ball on it that I liked a lot that they did away with. But that was kind of like the comparison to the iPhone. This was 2010, something like that.
Yeah.
Gosh, man, almost 10 years ago.
Oh man, don't start with that.
I mean, it's just hard to believe that, it feels like we've had smartphones forever.
Yeah.
Really, I do so much with this tiny little thing.
Yeah. It's also notable. Actually, sorry. Speaking of 10 years, almost 10 years ago, 2010. Let's get us back on track. Yesterday, so May 23rd, was the 8-year anniversary of the final episode of Lost, which I was getting a little listful about that. And I know, Jay, we talk about that sometimes, and that you, I think you've only gotten a little bit into the first season, but I think at some point, I'm gonna have to. I know we've been inexact with doing these shows, but I'll make a firm commitment.
Yeah.
We're gonna start watching Lost. And it's because if it's only just
we should do that.
Watching Lost,
we should do a season. We could do an episode on a season.
Yes,
that'd be cool.
Because Lost is my favorite show. Lost is not the best show, but it is my favorite show, and there's all kinds of reasons why, and we could get into that. But it just, for me, it hits me in all the right places, and it could even too be one of those things where and the creators and the people who made it always talked about how they thought that the journey was going to be more satisfying than the end. And given that some people really hated the end, that's clearly true, but I didn't hate the end, and I really think there's more people that liked the end than didn't. And even so, it's just a really good, it's fun. When I think back on watching Lost when it was live, I think back to theorizing with my friends. We used to, because I was in college at the time, we would Wednesday nights, we'd all kind of hunker down. We'd order food from this Chinese place that I loved. Oh my God, I think about that Chinese place all the time. And we'd eat Chinese food, we'd watch Lost, and then we'd theorize. It was so great.
Food's coming in again. Okay, chicken and broccoli or beef and broccoli?
Wow, how'd you know? We must be like this, buddy. It was chicken with broccoli.
No, I'm gonna let you finish. I'm a lemon chicken guy myself because
interesting. So here's what I do. If I'm trying a new Chinese place, I have to try the chicken and broccoli first. If that's good, I will branch out into other things. If that's garbage, I don't even I remove that from my call list. It's I'll never go there again. But what I really like is like garlic chicken or something like that. Ooh. And the place I'm referring to, I'll even give a plug. It's not like we follow radio rules. It's a Chinese food place in Syracuse, New York. It's just off of the campus for Syracuse University. It's called Panda West. I have no reason to believe you guys will ever go there or be there, but if you ever are in Syracuse, go to Panda West. It is so good.
They're the first sponsor of Plateau TV.
Yeah, yes.
Yep.
I went there this not long ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I went back to Syracuse randomly. I forget. I think we were attending a wedding or something, and we went to Buffalo. And I literally, this is when I was living in Northern Virginia, so this made more sense. But I drove up to Syracuse first and then over to Buffalo, so we could have lunch at Panda West. That's how much I liked it.
That's dedication. I love it.
Dedication, yeah. But anyway, so Lost was just the experience of watching Lost really was great. And so Jay, actually, yes, we should absolutely do that. I think there'd be a lot of value in kind of watching it together. I'll have to bite my tongue. There's some cool stuff that happens. What we could do is we could make it like homework. We could do where you watch the show, you watch an episode, and then we come to the show and maybe we can watch it again or just kind of talk about it. I don't know. Well, let's figure out those details. But I haven't actually. It's been I think 2 years now since I watched Lost last. I had watched it. I've seen it all the way through maybe 5 times, 6 times by this point. So this would be number 6 or 7. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we can do that with a few shows. I know I'd like to do that with a few shows as well. Maybe maybe we do that with Buffy or the X-Files or something,
And in the case of Buffy, that is a show I've actually been contemplating starting it again. I haven't watched Buffy in, how long have I known my wife? That was actually, I always joke, my wife and I fell in love watching Buffy. Mm-hmm. I met her and she'd never seen it. In fact, I would like to take credit to, again, Cameron is the only one in the chat, so I'll take credit just to him and to you guys
Hi,
for being
Cameron.
the first person to binge. I would get like DVD sets for TV series and just like pound through them. Now, there was more work involved because you did have to get off the couch periodically because, the disc would only hold like, 3 or 4 episodes at a time. I would do that.
So you'd watch it and you'd pound through them? Can you
Yeah.
explain how?
It's actually
yes,
a great,
okay,
great terminology for Buffy too. So
yeah, it's
We've gone down a very dark path. We're
have.
going off the cliff.
well,
have.
I watched it when it was on television, so I basically recorded most of the episodes and just watched them over and over again on that SLP garbage quality.
Yeah. Well, we watched so I saw, oddly enough, I sort of picked up Buffy in its 6th season. So after it transitioned from WB to UPN, and it all worked out because at that time the FX network, which was kind of just getting a name for itself, the only show they had was The Shield. And that was their big show, and there was 50 commercials for it, every commercial break. But one of the things they were doing was running the Buffy reruns from the beginning, all the way through season 5. So I was able to catch up on the show before season 6 started, and I kind of watched it on from there. And oddly enough, I think I had watched Angel even before that. For whatever reason, I liked Angel more. I just, even though it was a spinoff of Buffy and I knew that, I actually would watch it sometimes and I liked it. So it was kind of cool, kind of putting the pieces together, from these things I'd seen on Angel and then Angels on Buffy and what the heck happened. And but yes, anyway, so yeah, I did watch some of those shows when they were live. And God, watching the last episode of Angel, that ending, don't want to, I don't want to spoil it for people. I really don't, but it's challenging. Angel, and it frustrates me because Angel was canceled in its 5th season, but their ratings had been only going up and up and up that entire season. They hit kind of a ratings doldrum in season 4, which I find ironic because I think season 4 is one of the most amazing seasons of TV ever done. It's just one big long story. It's so serialized, which is maybe why it had the ratings problems. But
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so you're more of a fan of Angel than Buffy.
I am. I think I identified with the characters more, and I gotta admit, in the final seasons of Buffy, she started to really piss me off.
Totally.
She would make some really shitty decisions, and then just kind of march around well, I'm the boss and I've got the power, and it's well.
They did a bunch of really strange things on that show. Remember when she died? I mean, spoiler, but I mean, God, it's 20-year-old TV.
Yeah.
I mean, she was dead for a season, right? I mean, but she came back to life, but she was different.
No. Well, that's not. Well, so yes, she did die, but she wasn't gone for a season. She basically came back in the premiere of the next season.
Right.
But so season 6 was this really I remember season 6. I think through the prism of time, people like season 6 more now. But at the time, I think fans hated season 6 because it was really dark. Buffy was really depressed. All the characters, it was kind of sort of every season of Buffy, and a lot of the episodes were always a meta kind of commentary on the troubles of youth and the problems you face in your life. And season 6 of Buffy was really very much reaching adulthood and what are the challenges you face when you get there. The problem is it just didn't make for great TV in some cases because it's all the characters you know and love are just depressed and not great. It is. Oh, and Cameron, you must be psychic. In the chat, Cameron noted, and Joss Whedon had left. I was about to say, during the season 6 time period, it's worthwhile to point out that Joss Whedon had 3 television shows on the air. He had Buffy, he had Angel, and he had Firefly. And frankly, that year, he was pretty much putting everything he had into Firefly. And again, I think he's admitted that. I think he's talked about it on Firefly commentaries. I think he's talked about it on some of the commentaries he did for Buffy episodes. He was being pulled in a lot of directions, but I I'm not. This is not to say that I think season 6 is without merit, because by the way, season 6 of Buffy did bring us the fabulous villains of the trio, which was for the uninitiated, a trio of characters that had previously appeared in Buffy, or at least most of them had. Um, and they were just these nerdy kids who played video games, and they thought they were Buffy's nemesis,
Yeah.
but really they were kind of just doing stuff that annoyed her. And at the end of the season, it sort of got like more interesting and dangerous, but it was that was a bright spot of that season, like the characters of the trio, and they did a lot of funny stuff. And it was even cool too, because like Xander, who was like the only person on the show without powers, like there was like finally like a threat like he could deal with without really needing like Buffy or somebody around. So anyway, I'm going far afield now, but
no, I'm all for it.
Yeah, it's but to your what sent us down this path, Jay, is absolutely. I'd love to do a Buffy like watch along or something with you, or even just take an episode of the show and dive into it more deeply, because I think Buffy's one of the shows, I think maybe Deep Space Nine before it, that kind of started changing my conception of like what TV could be. Because if you really think about what and we can dive into this with some of the other stuff we're going to talk about here, but when you think about like what TV used to be, and when I talk about used to be, I'm really thinking of like the 70s, the 80s, and even the 90s to some extent. It's like everything was just sort of self-contained within itself. It was like, it's like we have an episode and it's like Chandler gets stuck in the ATM, and like that's an episode in and of itself. And again, sitcoms are a different thing. I shouldn't. It is a good episode. I shouldn't pick on it. My point is, like hour-long dramas, like even Law and Order is a good example of this. It's like one case, one story, and then like the next week, it's like it's a completely different case, new victims, new situations, and like our main characters are the same, but like it's almost like we hit the reset button every week in terms of like the progression of the story. Sorry, Orc, what were you about to say?
Yeah, during that time for me, it was a lot of stupid shit I was into, like games and like wrestling, when it was actually not dog shit. But it was mainly Hercules and Xena.
Right.
That was my go-to, baby.
Right. And those shows were serialized too, to an extent. Yeah. Like they had a memory. Like they didn't just hit the reset button every week necessarily. So there was like an accumulated knowledge with them as well. So they actually kind of fall, I think, into the category I'm thinking of shows that really started to change like how TV could be. And when you think about TV now, I think CBS largely exists on this, but a lot of other networks, are really trying to do stuff that has a memory. I mean, think of like a show like Parks and Recreation. I mean, Parks and Rec is basically a sitcom. It's a multicam sitcom, and there's no laugh track or anything, but it's basically a sitcom. It's like zany characters who work for the Parks Department. Mm-hmm. And of course there's more to it than that. But like there's continuity on that show. Like they make references to things like in season 5, like they'll make references to things that happen in like season 2, or like sometimes they'll even just make jokes and not really even give you an explanation as to like what the reference is. Like it's kind of very intelligent that way, I think. Mm-hmm. But anyway, all of this is to say that Buffy and Angel it was just transformative for me, that there are these shows that are telling really interesting, cool stories, kind of like about like superhero type characters. And they respected the audience's intelligence. It's like if we tell you like Buffy has this power, but like it affects her this certain way, or even like the whole Angel storyline with like how Angel and Buffy can't really be together because of this like curse he has. Like the show always respected that. And even on Angel, when they sort of like got around it a couple of times to sort of give you interesting episodes, I still felt like they honored the spirit of the show. And if anything, it just made the mythology more interesting. And by the way, the reference there, Jay, and I don't know if you remember it, but there's an episode of Angel in the first season that I actually don't think people like very much, but I think it's fine. Where like Angel kind of gets involved with like a Hollywood actress. Like he saves her, and then she like hires him as like protection, and she kind of like starts to fall in love with him, but he's like pulling away because he's always afraid of what's going to happen. So she doses him. She basically gives him like a happy drug, or like a date rape drug or something.
She roofies him.
She roofies him basically, but since it gives him kind of like a synthetic perfect happiness, he becomes Angelus like at the end of that episode. And it's temporary, which is why I think that people don't like it, is they think it's really kind of like cheating the rules. But I don't know. I think, that the character of Angelus, Angel's sort of evil double, if there's an easy way to describe that, he's just so good. Which, by the way, season 4 of Angel proved that like doing like a long story arc with Angelus was totally doable and like really great TV. But yeah, so transitioning just a little bit, in terms of the stuff that I've been watching, Jay, and I do want to talk about Roseanne a little bit, but we were just talking about the 90s. NYPD Blue is on Hulu right now, which is a show that I was kind of young when it started, but when it was in its 5th or 6th seasons, I actually started kind of like watching it periodically. And as a matter of fact, I think when I started watching it is because my parents, who had sort of casually watched it, were like tuning in every week. And I think it's when they were killing off Jimmy Smits' character. Like those are my first memories of NYPD Blue are when, spoiler alert, but again, like you say, 20, 25, 30-year-old show. Jimmy Smits' character, Detective Simone, he dies of like a lot of medical complications. So that was
Bruce,
kind of.
If it's not Friday the 13th or McDonald's or fast food, I don't want you spoiling it, please.
Well, I'd be surprised if you remember 30 minutes after we talk about this. But in any case, I've watched. So what's funny is that I mentioned how on FX I was catching up with Buffy around the same time. Court TV. Remember Court TV? Remember that was a thing.
Court TV. True TV now.
Yeah, that's right. It had like the NYPD Blue syndication rights, and they were running like NYPD Blue from the beginning. And so I don't know if it was around the same time as Buffy or some different time, but there were just various times in my life where I started watching shows like in the middle, and then just my luck, they started like airing reruns of it on some like, cable network, and I would catch up with it and like understand all the things that came before. And NYPD Blue was one of those shows, and so I then watched NYPD Blue pretty much straight through until the end, when it ended in like 2004. In fact, 2004 was a rough year because I'm pretty sure that's the same year Angel ended. I think that was the same year that Lenny left Law and Order. I just remember that May being very depressed, very sad. But in any case, I've been really enjoying NYPD Blue and shocked, frankly, at how well it holds up. Did you watch NYPD Blue at all, Jay? Were you familiar with that?
I mean, not frequently. I know the characters, and I watched every once in a while when it was on. I wasn't a regular viewer.
Yeah, it's again, the whole point of our show, even though we talk about whatever we want to talk about, is sort of to recommend things that if you have a few minutes or you want to get into something, I highly recommend NYPD Blue. It's I think you'll actually be shocked at how good it is. And interestingly enough, if you want to see David Caruso acting, like seriously acting and turning in an amazing performance, David Caruso is the one of the main. He's like the lead character basically of the first season of NYPD Blue before his head blew up. And he's just it's shocking to me. Because like at this point he's like a joke. Like you watch like CSI Miami, and you're like that's your acting. Like you're just, it's like, this killer is as cold as ice. Wow, that.
Is that still on?
No, it's not. It was canceled. But he's very good, and that's the point I'm coming to, is that like David Caruso is fantastic in the first season of NYPD Blue. And there's all kinds of backroom drama about how his head really got too big. He was mad that Dennis Franz's character, Andy Sipowicz, was like getting more and more screen time, because he actually became like an audience favorite. Sipowicz did, and by the end of the show, it was his show. But Caruso was kind of mad that he was taking screen time. He asked for a huge raise, and they basically just kind of let him go. And so he only lasts into about 4 episodes of season 2, and that's when Jimmy Smith's character comes aboard. But anyway, the idea I want to leave you with is that if you're out there, if you have a Hulu subscription, it's worth checking out for sure. It's good stuff.
Hulu's great, man. I can't say enough good things about Hulu.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about Angel. Angel's on there. And
yep. So is Buffy.
Oh,
Firefly too.
I have to interrupt so I don't forget this in 30 minutes. But so Amazon Prime and Netflix Instant, they kill it with their originals. They fucking destroy and murder everyone with fucking their originals. They're that good. The original content.
Yeah.
Hulu, not so much. All dog shit, in my opinion. I haven't found one good thing.
I like The Handmaid's Tale.
I watched The Path and I was like, all right, Breaking Bad with religion, and then just like nothing fucking happened for 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Oh, this sucks.
I started watching the James Franco Stephen King adaptation of 11/22/63, and I was liking it, and I don't know why we stopped. I have to admit, and I don't know if my wife's watching, but like I'm gonna. Sometimes we stop watching something because she doesn't like it or she's not in the mood, and then she's not in the mood for a really long time, and then we lose the thread, and then we just don't ever pick it up again. I think that's what happened with that, because I actually think it was really good. Like that, it was a pretty good adaptation of a Stephen King story, which, as we all know, those can be hit and miss. More hit though lately than miss, if it shows us anything. But yeah, I have to admit that there's not a ton of stuff that is like a Hulu original that I have much interested in.
I'm not as well versed as you guys, but like just from like Netflix, there's a bajillion things. Amazon, you have Goliath, you have Jean-Claude Van Johnson, you have there's just tons of stuff. They brought back the car show. Help me out here.
I know what you're talking about.
Oh, I know what you're talking about too.
Grand fucking whatever the hell it's called. Anyways, they got the guys from the UK and the Grand Tour, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, that is it.
And a bunch of other really good stuff. And then, but Hulu, like, I mean, just none of their stuff it doesn't look good at all. The Path sucks in my opinion. And then Handmaid's Tale might be good. I haven't seen it, so I can't completely judge it. But I really don't even want to at this point, just because they released so much dog shit. Like I don't. It's like whatever.
I mean, Netflix put a bunch of crap out at one time too. I mean.
Yeah, but for every one pile of shit, for every 1 or 2 pieces of shit Netflix puts out, they put out a gem. Like, they'll have like 2 shitty stand-ups, and then they'll like Chris Rock will release his. I'm like, all right, that's cool.
I mean, I haven't seen a lot of this stuff, so I really can't comment on it. I did watch some of that 11/22/63, and that was people love that show. I really wasn't that impressed.
I thought it was a good adaptation of the book, and I mean, so like I come at it from a biased. I don't know if you read the book, Jay, but I may be biased because it's like I liked the book. Well, you know, the book has the same problem that like every Stephen King book has, which is it's a really cool book with a really cool concept, and 90% of it is great, except 10% of his like at the end, like he has a real problem ending things in a satisfying way. Like sort of where you think it's going and where he ultimately goes with it, I just think is really, I don't know, unsatisfying. There's like a good emotional ending, but like in terms of his, I don't want to spoil anything, but Stephen King's arguably his best book, or the book that his fans sort of heap a ton of praise on, is The Stand. And I don't know whether you guys have read that or seen the miniseries or whatever, but The Stand truly is a really great book. Lots of great characters, a big sweeping epic story. And then you get to the end, and it really just like shits all over you. like you've heard the term like Deus ex machina, basically like God comes in and saves the day. Like that's literally what happens. Like I'm not going to apologize for spoiling, a 30, 40-year-old book, but that was just kind of unsatisfying. And that's not the only one of his stories that has that problem. So let's come to one of the hot topics of the day. Have you guys been watching Roseanne this season? Because that premiered back in March.
I have not. I've seen a lot of people upset or happy with the content, but I've not seen it.
I don't know why, because I remember I watched Roseanne when it was first on in the 90s, and I remember I liked it. I thought it was funny. That was another one of those shows that was in syndication. Like Fox used to run Roseanne reruns like every evening. and just kind of with like the family situation that I had growing up. We were always home at that time, always eating dinner kind of early, and we would watch TV sometimes. And so I watched Roseanne then. I thought it was funny. I thought the last couple seasons of it were dog shit, to use a J term. But I don't know why. There was something. I think I was interested because like they were getting back a lot of the original writers too. Like Norm Macdonald is one of the writers of the new season, one of the executive producers. And I think Norm Macdonald is like one of the funniest guys out there. Like he's just really, really funny. Like his Weekend Update for Saturday Night Live to me is like the quintessential Weekend Update. Like Norm just didn't care. Like Norm would tear down anybody. He'd like rip on everyone under the sun. Unlike the Weekend Update now, where it's basically just like an anti-Donald Trump machine. Like, his Weekend Update was funny and like just kind of hit on everything that I thought was pretty cool. But in any case, I have been watching it, and I've been enjoying it. I've been finding it really funny. It's entertaining to watch a show that the actors in it so clearly are having a great time doing it. Like there are just scenes where it's like it looks like every character is like trying not to just smile the whole time, which I guess maybe could be distracting, but you feel like you're having a good time with them. Like it's been I think it's funny. I think it's been a good show.
It kind of sucks considering the way the show ended before, you know, with John Goodman and Roseanne kind of butted heads, and they basically killed him off. And then they pulled the whole Jacob's Ladder scenario at the end.
Yeah, I've learned more about that because I always thought that it was just like Roseanne being difficult and John Goodman didn't want to deal with her. And I've learned since then, because in some of the interviews leading up to the new show, certainly Roseanne was difficult, like, and she says as much, but it sounds to me like John Goodman was like an alcoholic throughout the 90s, which I didn't really know.
Pretty sure he still is.
He may be. He may very well be, but maybe he's got it more under control now. Apparently back then, like, he was just out of control, and that's what, like, because some people have talked to like about that, and so like I think Jimmy Kimmel asked him about that, and he was just like, I was drinking a lot. It was just like a tough time for me. He's like, and I just didn't know how good I had it.
But in the period run of that show, he went from a nobody to an A-list actor.
Yeah. Well, I would argue he didn't really become like A-list, and I'm not sure he even is A-list is like.
He's A-list in my book.
Well,
it's as far as his acting ability, I guess.
Fair enough. I would agree. He's A-list to me too. But I actually think he sort of came into his own from an acting perspective more recently. And when I use the term recent, I think I mean within like the last 10 years. Because if you think it's some of the roles he's taken recently, where he's been like, the villain in some movies, and he's just kind of just turned in some outstanding performances. Which again isn't to shit on his like sort of late post Roseanne period, because that is when The Big Lebowski came out in I think 1997, 98, which to me is his finest role of all time.
It's probably what most people remember him for.
Yes. But in any case, the only other thing I guess I wanted to say about Roseanne is that like some of the, because I've been watching it, like, and I am like actually watching the episodes, I'm not just like reading about it online and getting mad and posting on Twitter, is that I just feel like some of the reviewers that are going after the show are kind of like missing the point. And I think it's sort of calling attention to a larger problem with certain storytelling today. And so let me give you an example. I think they just aired their finale earlier this week. But the week before that was an episode that was in all the newspapers and press because it was like, oh, Roseanne's like anti-Muslim. And so I watched the episode, and yeah, basically like Roseanne is saying some insensitive things, and, she's scared of her neighbors. And, that's sort of how the episode starts.
Yeah.
But if you sit down and you watch it, like just through the prism of the point of view of the episode, at no point is like Roseanne thought to be like correct. Like she makes some of these comments and some of these jokes, and some of them are played for laughs. But like, the other characters in the story are like constantly challenging her on it. And over the course of the episode, she actually comes to sort of like feel bad for the way she was thinking about her neighbors. And even to the point where she's like confronted with some like really truly like ugly like racism towards this family, and she sort of like kind of stands up for them and kind of sees like how she was behaving. And to me, like, that is a story. I mean, am I crazy? It's like your character starts in one place.
You have
And
to have
maybe they're
character
wrong.
development, right?
Yeah, they think one thing. They go through some situations, they meet some characters, they have some experiences, they consider what they've done and said, and maybe they change for the better, or maybe they don't. But like your character has to start someplace to go on a journey. And what's been frustrating me about a lot of the commentary that I've seen about the show, and particularly the commentary on this episode, was just that it was like, if Roseanne just started off the episode like, oh, hunky dory, the world's great, Muslims are awesome people, and I like them, like, there's no story to tell. Like,
But-
there's nowhere for her character to go. And from a more macro perspective, not everybody in the world thinks the same way about every culture, about every sexual orientation, about politics. There's nothing wrong with having characters of a different point of view, even if it's a point of view that's not great.
But you don't agree.
You know,
with.
I mean,
But that's the society we live in, man. It's offensive if it goes against the grain at all.
Right.
And but I mean, that's what Roseanne has always done since day one.
Yeah.
Like it rubbed people the wrong way because it approached issues like that were sometimes hard to talk about. You know, Roseanne covered virtually everything. Right. You know, like drugs, alcoholism, you know, teenage pregnancy.
Oh yeah.
I mean, every, you know, homosexuality.
Yes.
Before, you know, it was mainstream stuff like it is now. You know, before it was, you know, before it was necessarily acceptable, I guess.
Yeah. And they didn't even sort of do, because like some shows, because of censors and other things, always had to kind of like skirt around it. And I don't want to pick on Seinfeld because, you know, Seinfeld's quite possibly the greatest show of all time, just, you know, at a macro level. But like when they did their masturbation episode, like NBC wouldn't even let them use the word. Now, you could make the point, them not saying the word actually makes the episode more interesting and stylized, which is fair. But I guess the point I'm saying, and as you sort of were pointing to, is that, you know, when they're talking about these things like teen pregnancy or abuse, like they faced it head on and had like really frank discussions about it. And you just weren't seeing that on TV in a lot of places, you know? And so it was a thing. It was very real. And so I've enjoyed the season of Roseanne. I'm actually looking forward to watching the finale. In fact, I should note, most TV these days, like we've been watching a lot of NYPD Blue reruns on Hulu. We hardly watch anything live. Yeah. We have been routinely sitting down to watch Roseanne when it airs. It's just this week kind of got away from us, so we didn't. But it's interesting. And I've enjoyed it. I'm glad they're coming back for a second season, and I'm, you know, if it's anything like this season was, I think it'll just be more and more interesting. I only hope they can get some of their like ancillary characters back more often. Because like the character of David, he's
not on there. Oh man, yeah, David.
Well, no, so he was able to appear in one episode, but only one.
Fuck.
And they wrote. It sounded like it was truly just a scheduling thing. Like it wasn't like him like, oh, I'm not gonna come back.
I'm too big.
It sounded like he wanted to do as much as he could, but you know, again, he's shooting his own sitcom, and they have pretty unforgiving schedules. So, they definitely left the door for him in terms of where he is in the story to come back again and be a regular part of the show. So I think if they can figure it out, they'll do it. But I don't know. I enjoyed it, and so what I'd like to point out too is that kind of like how, you know, Roseanne starts in one place, like philosophically, and then like over the course of a story, she might learn a lesson, or maybe she doesn't, but there's still like, you know, you see that journey. It's sort of like in stark contrast to like a show like Supergirl on the CW. Like everybody on Supergirl is just like super accepting, and there's nothing that they don't like get behind, and it just gets to be kind of, I don't know, like uninteresting. Mm-hmm. Like there was a plot originally, like in the second season of the show, where Supergirl, like her sister, kind of realized that she's gay.
Yeah.
And I would actually note some of that story, like particularly for the sister character, oh man, it's gonna kill me. I can't remember that actress's name, but she was in the spoof of She's All That. It's like Not Another Teen Movie. I think she
Oh
was
yeah,
in
yeah,
that.
yeah. I know you're talking about.
Yeah, her. In any case, like she like had me like my wife was like crying during some scenes that like she was just talking about how like she feels different inside and like it's lonely and all these other things, and just it was just a really powerful story. But what didn't really happen in the story, like Supergirl just sort of like accepted it like right out of the gate. I was like, oh great, and so does everybody else. And it's not like I'm asking for like these characters to like crap on their friend who all of a sudden announces that she's gay, but I don't know. It would be interesting like if the characters had like a different point of view once in a while, rather than just like, oh, we're all just happy and smiling all the time. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like the villain is like a guy who doesn't recycle, right? I mean,
Yeah, right. And that, it's funny you say that because it's like, yeah, the villain on that show actually is a like a big like corporate dude who like doesn't care about the environment, and he's always trying to like beat regulations, and
it's not real. I mean, it's not like, I mean, back to Roseanne, that's kind of what it was really polarizing when it came out, because there really was no voice for, lower income white people at that time. It was all, rich, full house, they're living in a giant house in San Francisco, and, all these people are really well off. It really wasn't ever that perspective of, American families. Kind of like what the Jeffersons were for a lot of black people.
yeah, yeah. I would challenge that though, because I have seen a lot of articles saying that and a lot of people saying that, but it is fair to say that like some of those shows do still like The Middle, which was already on ABC starring Patricia Heaton, is very much a middle class family. The difference with Roseanne, I would say though, is that I really think Roseanne, like you were like Roseanne, really tackled like kind of the issues of the day head on. Like the world they lived in was very, very real. The Middle is still sort of very sitcom-y, like in that traditional way, like not like groundbreaking, which not every show needs to be,
Exactly.
Seinfeld.
Yeah.
There's again, like, I think some people might be surprised to learn, like, I like The Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
Even though I like all these high concept, really innovative shows, that show just makes me laugh. Like, I don't know how to explain it other than so sometimes when we're on the Sausage Factory and like, not to call out Rambo and Mike, but let's say Mike and Rambo could be sometimes cynical about movies and TV sometimes. I feel like my perspective is just simply that I go into something, be it a TV show, a movie, whatever, I want to like it.
Right.
I want to enjoy myself. And if a show disrespects me so much or just isn't funny or just doesn't work, like I'll stop watching it or I'll give up on it. But like I want to like it. And again, in the case of like The Big Bang Theory, it's like, I don't know. They tell stupid jokes. I think they're funny. The characters are funny. They get into goofy situations. They have funny cameos. It just makes me laugh. And so I don't know. Maybe I'm an easy laugh. Maybe maybe I set the bar too low. I don't know.
I've honestly never watched an episode. It just kind of, I know the concept, and it just, it sucks that nerd culture has now become or I don't even know if it is anymore, but at least it was, in recent years, like the big thing, like.
I think it's hanging around, but yeah, there was definitely like a zeitgeist moment where everything was sort of like nerded up and geeky and that kind of thing. It's I don't know. I would recommend if you're ever just like surfing the channels and it's late or something, and TBS is airing one of their 15 episode long marathons of it. Like watch it. It's funny. I think. I think you get a laugh out of it if you gave it a chance. But so the only other thing, I was going through this, and there was actually one show I wanted to call out for you, Jay. I don't know whether you watched it. Did we ever talk about Godless on Netflix?
I don't think I've seen that.
Well, so this might be a show that Orc would get into because it's a limited series and it's shorter than even a usual season. So Godless is a limited like event series for Netflix. It's not meant to be like 15 seasons. It had one season, and I think it's done. Like I don't think they're doing any
Really?
more of it. It starred Jeff Daniels. It starred oh gosh, it killed. Why can't everybody's gonna think I'm like a misogynist? I can't think of any of the female actresses' names. But she was the actress from Downton
The
Abbey.
big tits. The one with the big fucking tits.
She's the actress from Downton Abbey, and then she had that show on TNT where she's like a criminal. God, I can't think of her name.
Michelle Dockery.
Fantastic actress and
Michelle Dockery. Is that her name?
Michelle Dockery. Wow, Orc with the save.
Wow.
Good call, man. Michelle Dockery. That's who I'm thinking of. So it's got Jeff Daniels, Michelle Dockery, this guy Jack O'Connell, who I think is like British or Scottish or something, but here he's an American, like they all are. And I think it's only like 8 episodes or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but just a great. It's a Western, and it just tells an interesting story. And Jeff Daniels plays like a pretty effed up, scary villain. Like
Jeff Daniels is awesome, man.
Like Jeff Daniels, I think, has the benefit of. This is different because again, Dumb and Dumber was a long time ago. But I always when I see Jeff Daniels, I always think of Dumb and Dumber. Like I think more modern people might look at him and think of like The Newsroom, in which he plays more like a serious character. But I always think of him as kind of like a goofy, friendly-faced guy.
Yeah.
So when you put him in the role of a villain, like the villain in this story, like he's truly scary, and he's really just, I think, very effective. And the show is kind of just about Jeff Daniels has this gang that's kind of out there roving, looking for revenge against one of its members who kind of like abandoned them and stole their stuff. And then it's kind of juxtaposed against there's this town in the West populated almost exclusively by women. All of their, all their husbands and sons died in a mine accident. And so, the whole season's kind of like leading to a fever pitch of, these kind of two things coming together. And I really don't want to say more than that. I hope that you guys check it out. It's really good. Jerpin in the chat asks, wasn't Jeff Daniels in Speed? Yes, he was. He was a part of a I make this quote all the time, and I don't think anyone even remembers what it's from. Sounds like you would, which is I always go, pop quiz, hot shot.
Oh, of course I know where that's from. Yeah.
And for years, I have always used the Speed theme song as like, I always just like in my personal life, I don't do it on the show as much. I don't know how it translates through a microphone, but I don't know. I'm always like singing songs or like making sound effects. And so I always go like dun, 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 which is the theme to Speed. So whenever like, if I'm playing like a video game, I remember I was playing Halo once and like the other team was like, had like hunkered down in the base. And I took one of like the big Jeep things from it, and I like drove it up a ramp and like landed it like through the ceiling. And since it was like all on mic chat, that was what I did. I was like dun 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 dun. In any case, that's a heck of a diversion. But sorry, the point would be watch Godless, and also if you have some time, watch Speed, great movie.
A little bit of Jeff Daniels here. We got Arachnophobia in 1990.
Right, yes.
He was in Gettysburg.
John Goodman was also in Arachnophobia.
Yeah, he was. That's right. And it's all connected. He was in Speed and Dumb and Dumber in the same year. And 2 Days in the Valley is a film I like a lot of his that I don't hear people talk about.
Yeah.
He was in a film called Chasing Sleep, which is an independent film, which is really good. I think I caught that on like Sundance Channel, like back in the early 2000s. And I mean, dude's like a chameleon. I mean, to be that funny, like in Dumb and Dumber, and be able to really put out some genuine dramatic roles, like that's not easy, man.
To me, Jeff Daniels is the quintessential character actor.
Mm-hmm.
There are some actors that, I guess I'll just pick Brad Pitt. He's always the easy one to pick. Like Brad Pitt is always going to sort of be in like the same kind of a role. Every now and again,
that's true.
You'll see him in something sort of off kilter, like when he was in that wasn't it like a Coen Brothers movie where like
what
the heck was that movie called? I don't know. He played like a fitness guy who's wearing like a bright red shirt, and he's really just like gee gosh and kind of like goofy. Every now and again he'll appear in something like that, but for the most part, it's like, if you want Brad Pitt, if you want your like chiseled jaw, like action hero, or big tall leading man, Jeff Daniels could be everything under the sun. Like maybe the one thing he couldn't be is the chiseled jaw leading man, but he could be everything else.
I feel like Brad Pitt has gone against type just for the reason you're saying, to show that he can do it. But I think Brad Pitt's a really good actor too.
He is. And if anything, it's actually a shame because he is a really great actor. I mean, God, I think of Seven. Like that's such a great movie for all kinds of reasons. But he's really great in it.
Brad Pitt was the guy in Burn After Reading who goes like this. Goes,
Burn After Reading, yeah.
That's
right.
Yeah. And then,
that was it. That was the movie. Yeah.
While we're off of on Jeff Daniels, I don't know. A lot of people have like favorites that a lot of people agree on, like Dumb and Dumber and stuff. I liked him. I thought his best role was in State of Play. That was my favorite.
Remind me what that is. I remember the title, but I don't remember the story.
I believe Russell Crowe works for a newspaper, and there's corrupt Congress people, and he's trying to expose them or something. I believe is what it was.
Oh yeah, and that's actually a fairly recent. That's like within the last 10 years or so, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I remember that movie now.
I'm gonna check that out again.
That was when you go to the theater. It's a Friday night, and like my dad and I were like, all right, what the hell should we see? And then we're just like, all right, we'll check this one out. And that was one. It's not like an Oscar crazy award-winning picture, but it's a really good film.
Yeah,
I like it. Yeah,
that's good. Some of the other things I wanted. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jay.
Jeff Daniels was in Something Wild, which I just watched, and I didn't think I'd seen it before, but it turns out I had, and that's from the '80s. Really good film. If you guys haven't seen it,
I've only heard of it.
Really good stuff.
Something else I wanted to note for you guys, because actually I think I brought this up in the last show we had back in March. The Joel McHale show with Joel McHale, another Netflix production, by the way, was renewed. Like Netflix asked for 6 more episodes, which will air in July.
All dropping on the same day, right?
Yes, which is interesting. I wonder how that will. Well, I guess it doesn't matter, but that is what they're doing, and I'm glad. Like I hope they keep that show around. I love that. What
concept. Would you rather? Would you rather the way it is now, or would you rather it like say every 2 months they drop so many episodes on one day?
I mean, I want to see how they do it, but I actually like for that show. I like the week to week because, like, it's more current. Then, like, they can kind of like if there's something because so a lot of the shows they make fun of, like was it Southern Comfort or Southern whatever those stupid shows are. Like my wife watches a lot of them.
Oh, really?
So sometimes it's like I'll see something like that she's got on, and I'll think like, oh man, like I hope they bring that up. And sometimes they do, because there's actually been a couple of times where they like bring it up, and like my wife like starts rolling her eyes, like, oh man, I know what they're gonna do. And so there's a certain immediacy, I think, to that show that's important. But then again, there is so much. Again, sort of the central conceit of this show is there's so many things on TV. Like, how do you know what to watch? How do you know what to focus on? So there's so much that happens in any given day, let alone weeks or a month until we get new episodes. I think it's fine. Like they have more than enough content to put out something that'll still feel fresh.
I can't believe that damn Jersey Shore shit is back. And
whenever he brings, I love it. I love how every time he brings it up, he's like, "This week on the Jersey Shore," like he's annoyed that he has to talk about it.
It's the same people, man. Like from a lot, when the soup went off, like he was still doing all that stuff. So
yeah,
I guess pick up right where you left off, right?
In fact, they've actually done a pretty decent job. Well, I don't know if they were. Clearly, there's like nothing that's blocking them from doing it. Maybe they just have chosen not to, but they haven't picked on E-network shows too much. But one episode when they did, and I don't know whether you remember it, it's like recently on the E-network, and like, when they brought up the graphic, it was like ah,
yeah.
They had like a horror sound play.
Hey, go for it, man.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. But like so that was just a nice touch. But I just. Joel McHale, I think, is really funny. I think he's great in everything he does. I was a huge Community fan, which, before we transition to something else, Jay, I know you were working your way through Community. Did you stall out again? What's going on with that?
I'm somewhere in season 3 right now. It's
nice.
petering around for me a little bit, and I know that I think Donald Glover leaves in season 4, right? So
No, he leaves at the beginning of season 5. He puts in a few episodes in
okay,
season 5, I believe. Yeah.
so I'm not looking forward to that because he's one of my favorite characters on there.
I can't believe you still sound so sort of like milk toast
No,
about
no,
it, because especially by season 3, the show hits its stride. I think it's really funny.
I loved it. Season 2, I thought was great. I don't know, man. It seems like they've. I don't know. Maybe I just need to get through a little bit more. I was really into it, and marathoning my way through it.
Yeah, I thought that the second paintball episode I like for, well, there's a couple obvious reasons why I like that episode, and perhaps you remember what I'm talking about. But beyond that, I just thought it was like really well done, and I love how like every season they try to like outdo themselves to some extent. But I do remember there were a lot of articles written at the time about that one. The thing I'm referencing that I liked was in that episode. There's a scene where Allison Brie is like running down a hallway in like slow motion, and if you know who Allison Brie is, and I'm not sure again, Allison Brie is a very beautiful young woman, and she's bouncing around is basically what's happening. And I just remember her joking around and the creator joking around. He's like, there was so much that went into that shot, like different camera angles, and we did it a bunch of times. He's like, you have no idea. So clearly even they understood what they were doing, which I think is funny. But
I recently watched Harmontown, and I don't know. I like Chevy Chase. I know he's a jerk, but I kind of know what's coming. So
yeah, I don't know. I just always thought Community was a rare show that for me only got better and better. And I know there are a lot of people that shit on the 4th season, which is the season that Dan Harmon wasn't there for. I mean, I don't know. While definitely it did seem like it was a little bit different, I didn't think it like fell off a cliff or anything. I was glad Dan Harmon came back. I thought seasons 5 and 6 were really great, but I don't know. Like I don't really like. To me, I watched season 4 and I still laugh. Like there's some good stuff to be had in that season.
I take that back. I am in season 4. I think I'm on like episode 2 of season 4.
Okay, so you did like, because the first episode of that season's where like it comes back and it's like pretending like it's a sitcom, like a single camera sitcom, that thing. Yeah. So this season, like I didn't mind it. They do some interesting things this season. And it's actually worth noting that they introduce a character in this season played by whatchamacallit? She's gonna be Captain Marvel. What the hell's her name? Allison. I am terrible today. I can't think of any names, but Captain Marvel is in that season. She guest stars as a really cool character. That
Brie Larson.
Brie Larson. That's I'm not even an Allison. Brie Larson plays a character, and she was decent enough that even Dan Harmon brought her back when he was back on the show in season 5. So, there's good stuff to be had. There's some good laughs to be found there. But actually, this reminds me, because talking about Allison Brie, Glow returns next month. I think Glow's back at the end of June or mid-June, something like that.
Glow's awesome, man. I really don't know what they're gonna do.
I can't believe how much I liked Glow. And what's funny is it's like, even though like Allison Brie was turning in a kick-ass performance, like really every character turned in such a kick-ass performance. It was really like the director. I thought he was just so funny to me. Like that comedian. Like I saw him interviewed on Norm Macdonald Live, like Norm Macdonald's YouTube show a little while back, and I thought he was really funny on there. Which actually, by the way, I don't know whether you guys have heard this. I think Norm Macdonald is getting a Netflix show.
Cool.
It sounds like it'll be kind of like an interview show similar to what he was doing on YouTube, but I'm guessing a little more polished, because that show could be rough sometimes. But yeah.
Did you ever watch Mark Harmon's Mark Maron's show on Stars or whatever channel it came on?
Yeah. Oh, it was like on
IFC or something.
IFC. I was about to say UFC. I was like, that's not right. I think I caught it like once or twice. I thought it was decent. Thought it was interesting. he's just an interesting guy. Like I like his mannerisms. He's just funny.
He's not a guy that's made for television. I don't think he needs to be unfiltered.
Right. Yeah. Again, that much is clear.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would like to do is transition to a couple of questions. Let's call them topics. The first one, and we actually already kind of talked about this a little bit, but I think it's actually really there's a lot we could go on, and it's like TV show transitions. So throughout like the history of TV, there's been various circumstances where a show is going along and then a character leaves and it's a major character. Like I mentioned NYPD Blue, like David Caruso was the star of that show and then he left, and it really wasn't even that big of a deal by that point, because at that point like Dennis Franz had sort of picked up the slack, but still, like, they had to write him out. They had to come up with the whole reason for what happened to his character and all these other things. I just the reason that I thought of this topic and why I wanted to talk to you guys about it and see what are some shows that you remember where this happened, what you thought about them. But the reason that I thought of it is some people get very down on this. And the thing that I'm going to point to as like being close to something that I love a lot is Mystery Science Theater 3000. So if you're at all a fan of that show, or at least you're aware of it, you know that when the show started, the show was created by Joel Hodgson. And he was the host of the show, and he, was the original character on the Satellite of Love, making fun of bad movies. Due to some behind-the-scenes drama and some other things, like he left in the 5th season, and he was replaced by Mike Nelson. When I was a kid, I found that exhilarating. Like, I just thought it was really cool that, like, the main guy on the show, like, got to escape the Satellite of Love, and then there's a new guy, and he has, like, a different temperament and mannerisms, and, like, there's some new stuff going on. And I tried to figure out in my head, like, why do I think that, like, what? There are some people who hate that. Like, they hate when, like, they lose characters that they love, or that a show has a big transition like that. And I'm thinking Orc is one of those people. But for me, I think it's because for so long, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, like, TV shows were very static. It was always the same characters, always the same location. The reset button got hit every week. Like, things never changed. So I just always, I think, like, having that in, like, as in my background for context, I thought it was exciting when a show would do something that actually did change the status quo. So, like, I got to the point where I actually really thought it was really cool and exciting if a show was going to, like, a character was going to get a spinoff, or they were just going to leave, or whatever, or die, or, whatever happened. Just for that. Like, because, like, Mystery Science Theater is it's a formulaic show by design. I mean, really, the point of the show is to make fun of bad movies. But there's an attachment to the character of Joel, and I don't know. When it's all said and done, I think I actually like Mike better.
Oh shit!
Yeah, I'm a Mike guy.
I'm
a Mike guy through and through.
I don't agree with that.
Let me explain why. This isn't just arbitrary. Part of the reason why is it's like I always felt like I definitely got into the fiction of the show of Mystery Science Theater, meaning there's a guy that was kidnapped and he's being forced to watch these bad movies. And I always just felt like Joel was a little too like, ho hum, okay, let's just watch the bad movie. And every now and again, he would kind of like lose his patience with a movie, but more often than not, he was always trying to keep like a positive perspective. I liked that there were episodes with Mike where like Mike would just get like pissed off, like, and the bots would get angry. And I just kind of liked that in the reality of the show, if you were being forced to watch bad movies and you like, had no control over it, like some of the horrible things you're watching, you'd get frustrated like having to watch it. And I also like that Mike tried to escape more, and there's other things, but what also I think is behind it too, Jay, is, and this isn't Joel's fault, but by the time Mike took over the show, like the riffing, like what they were doing was so down to a science, and like they did it so well that it was only getting better. So from my perspective, a lot of the Mike episodes are just so much better and more polished from a movie jokes perspective, but purely because by that point they were so good at it. I mean, when you think about it, like Joel invented almost a new form of comedy.
Yeah.
And so they had to sort of figure out, like, so I'm not taking anything away from Joel. And in fact, there are some very funny Joel episodes. I think Manos is really funny. I think, what is it? Oh God, I I can't remember anything today. EGA with Richard Kiel is really funny. There's one in particular that's like on the tip of my tongue that really makes me laugh. But this isn't like the crap on Joel. I think Joel is funny and he has really good episodes. I just, on balance, I prefer Mike. So I'm sorry. But anyway, this is all just an appetizer to explain. I think that's why the concept of changing casts, changing up the status quo interests me. Like I mentioned Deep Space Nine earlier. That's a show that largely had the same cast throughout the entire show until they killed off the character of Dax in the second to last season. And again, I liked that character, but I thought it was interesting. Like, hey, wow, we're gonna get a new Dax, because in the fiction of that show, and I don't know whether you guys are familiar with Star Trek, but this was a character that could kind of live through multiple lifetimes. So I just thought it was like, when the moment she died, that was my first thought. Like, oh man, I bet we're going to get to meet a new Dax next season. And I just thought that was interesting. Like, the characters would play off of her different. I don't know if it was going to be her, but I thought it was exciting. So I'm going to shut up for a second and just say that's why this interests me. But what are some examples that you guys can think of some shows where there was like a major cast shakeup, or, they killed a character off, and, sort of talk a little bit about like how you thought they did with that. I mean, did you think they succeeded? Do you think it made it better? That kind of stuff.
You want to keep it in Star Trek? We can go with Tasha Yar.
There you go. Absolutely. Now, I would make the case, and being fair and legitimate to this discussion, she was a main cast member. She was in the main credits. It was also in the first season of the show, though. So I would say that we hadn't really formed that much of an attachment with her.
Exactly. I mean, hindsight, it's not that big of a deal, but
yeah,
I wasn't watching TNG at that time live anyway.
Right.
I didn't catch on to it until a few seasons later.
Right.
But the people that I talked to that were watching it live, that was a pretty big deal at the time.
Yeah. I should also say, because I think eventually we'll talk about like Buffy and Angel to some extent, that it shouldn't just be necessarily a character leaving. It could also be adding a character. Because, again, we keep talking about Star Trek. Like Worf, one of the main characters from The Next Generation, Star Trek The Next Generation, became a main character on Deep Space Nine. And I think, personally, which, again, I don't want to offend you, Jay, since you had such a strong opinion about Mystery Science Theater, but, I think Worf's character on Deep Space Nine, like, he had a chance to be so much more of a fully fleshed character doing more interesting things than he ever did on The Next Generation. I mean, to be honest, on The Next Generation, Worf was always getting his ass kicked. On Deep Space Nine, Worf became like a badass. Like, it was rare he lost a fight on Deep Space Nine, whereas it was rare he won a fight on The Next Generation. He was always getting knocked over things.
Worf was like one of the main guys on Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
Versus, Geordi and Data, and you got the whole Picard and Riker.
Yeah.
Well,
he was a main guy on The Next Generation. He was in the main cast. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying, like, when you think of Deep Space Nine, Worf's probably the first person you think about.
Do
you think of Cisco? I mean, Cisco was kind of not a very, I don't know, he's not a very memorable guy.
Oh my, okay, we can't.
I mean,
I don't want to take the show down a rabbit hole, but we're gonna have to talk about this offline, perhaps, Jay.
I mean, he was fine, but I mean, he's no Picard. Let's just say it that way.
Oh well, okay. So don't let me assume I know what you're thinking. I'm not in your head, but I would ask you to try to separate the fact that Patrick Stewart is just an amazing, transcendent actor from the fact that, and again, I think that Avery Brooks is a really good actor too, but like, it's just that he's such a good actor. Is Jean-Luc Picard's character that much better? Did he go on a better journey than Sisko? I don't, like, objectively, I don't think you could say that he did, but I think you could say that he's just a better actor. I mean, come on.
I mean, there's no way of solving that argument, but I don't know. I mean, you got Locutus. I mean, come on.
I just think, okay, I guess we are going to talk about this. I just think the character of Sisko started in one place in the show, and by the end of the show, it's a little bit of like what we were talking about with Roseanne to some extent, where like throughout the course of Deep Space Nine, the commander, then captain of the station, went through a journey over which he changed a lot. And like, he came in very sort of rigid, sort of about career, kind of pissed off that he was even there, then kind of realizing like, wait a second, there's more here, there's important work to be done, then kind of getting into the religious stuff until finally, like in like the last season, in the final episode especially, like really embracing this like kind of aspect that he always sort of fought against, the religious stuff that, and again, like you say, maybe this is unsolvable. I'm not dumping on Picard. I want to be clear about that. I'm just saying, like, if you were to look at all the captains, I just think Sisko has a really interesting journey. I like Deep Space Nine. It might be my favorite Star Trek show.
Really?
And that's
wow.
and I am a fan, again, like the original series and even the next generation. Like, there are fantastic episodes to be had, but it's similar to how I talked about how like Buffy and Angel were like evolving my understanding of TV and how a show could be. I liked how Deep Space Nine was telling an ongoing story and like things that happened like in the next generation. Like, the Enterprise visits a planet. There's like a bunch of hippie sex freak people there. Wesley breaks something. They got to save him. They got to fix it. Then they leave. And then it's on to, there's a space amoeba. On Deep Space Nine, it was like the station's there. It's not going anywhere. There's a political problem on this like planet with these people. And yeah, we might have solved this week's crisis, but they're still pissed off at us. Like, we've got to solve the problem. And I don't know. I liked that aspect. I thought
I mean, they're different shows in that regard, really.
Yeah.
But you don't have to talk to me. I was always, a person who liked Deep Space Nine.
Right.
But I was more of a fan of Next Generation.
It was also too, like, I just thought it was really cool that Deep Space Nine was showing like massive, like Star Wars-esque like space battles in the end. Like when they were doing the big Dominion War stuff, I thought that was just really cool. And that's like that's like, the 10-year-old, 12-year-old kid that was watching, like, he loved all the big space battles. When I come back to it as an adult, I enjoy the rich drama and the character arcs and all that other stuff. But anyway, we're talking too much about Deep Space Nine. Please. So Jay, I stepped on you immediately. What are some other shows you can think of that, had something that kind of really resonated with you from like a character change perspective?
Let me ask you a
question. I can prompt you. I have a list of some things too. I could prompt you.
No. I have plenty I want to talk about, but I want to ask you first. Were you a Dr. Crusher person or a Deanna Troi person, or would you prefer Dax?
I don't. Oh, okay. In my mind, like, I don't know why I would have to pick one. Like, first of all, I like redheads. So I always thought Dr. Crusher was cute. Mm-hmm. Troi always had the cleavage going. Mm-hmm. So, she's fun. If anything, maybe Troi I like the least out of all of them, because Troi could be really annoying.
And as a character, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, like as a character, it was always just annoying where it's like there's an angry Romulan like yelling at Captain Picard. Captain, he's angry. It's like, yeah, we know. Okay. And then Dax, I actually, out of the three, I probably did like Dax, the original Dax, the best. Because I liked how... So when you think about Star Trek, and there were other characters like this in Deep Space Nine, but when you think about Star Trek, every character is kind of like buttoned up. Now, to some extent, like Riker was kind of puckish and would kind of play pranks on people and do that kind of stuff. I like that Dax was kind of the same way. Dax would kind of like pick on people, and she was she was like such a close friend with like Captain Sisko. She could like get under his skin, and she did that with the other characters. So if you're, I would probably rate them like Dax, Dr. Crusher, and then Troi at the bottom there. But in my mind, in the dark with my eyes closed, I think they're all great.
I was going to say, yeah. the way you're talking, I figured you would pick Dax.
Yes.
She went on to do, was it like Spin City or Becker? Okay, yeah.
And what sucks is, and you know what, this is, I can talk about this, and this doesn't even take us off topic. She was on Becker, and over the course of like the few seasons of the show, like there kind of was a burgeoning romance between her and Ted Danson's character, Dr. Becker. And like in the episode when they got together, like that was like a season finale, and then they fired her. Like they got rid of her, and she wasn't in the next season of the show. And then they brought in, was it, I think, Nancy Travis or something?
She looks very similar to Terry Farrell.
Yeah, it was like Nancy. I don't know. It was like a kind of like a blonde or a redhead with like
She was okay.
Yeah, but it was a very weird. Like and I remember like there have been interviews. Like I've looked it up online. Like this is what happens when you're on the internet. Sometimes you're like, whatever happened? Why did she leave?
Yeah.
And it almost seems to be like the writers. I could never figure out if she was like asking for more pay, and so the writers just got rid of her, or if the writers kind of got to that point and they thought, we just got them together, but you know what? Like this is a cul-de-sac. Like I don't think we can do anything with this. But whatever the case, like she just, they got together kind of in the end of one season, and then the next season, she just kind of doesn't show up, and like they find a letter, and she's just like, yeah, I had to leave.
See, that's the problem with Ross and Rachel actually getting together. They have to always be almost getting together throughout the entire show. They can never actually get together. That's what people tune in for.
So, okay, in some shows, I push against that concept though, because I think if you look at shows like, look at Parks and Rec.
Okay.
But look at the Office. Actually, I was going to say, what the heck am I talking about? The Office would probably be the quintessential one. But let's just set The Office aside. That's the obvious one to go to. Parks and Rec. Leslie and Ben were kind of courting each other. They danced around for a couple of seasons, and then they got married. And I would argue some of the episodes when they're like married and together are some of the funniest of the show. It's all in how like you treat those relationships. And I think because Friends, and again, I'm probably going to offend you again, Friends was such a like surface layer show. It was only about like the quick, easy audience laughs. If these two characters aren't like bouncing off each other, like what humor are they going to wring out of it? And I would note that like a show like Friday Night Lights, which I love that show. I don't know if you've watched it, but Friday Night Lights is always pointed to as like people always say in TV and movies, married people are boring. And that, like, I remember a lot of the times when Friday Night Lights was on, there were people writing articles, and there was just a thought out there of like, well, to the people who say that, you need to watch Friday Night Lights, because like the coach and his wife's relationship throughout that show was like some of the best drama and like humor and stuff that the show had. And anyway, I say that only because I don't like to me it's lazy writing if you can't make that work. Like if you have two characters that just have great chemistry, it's on you to make that work, right. I think.
But I mean, with a show like Friends, probably predominantly female audience, that's what they want to see. They want to see them get together, and then Ross fucks up and kisses somebody else when he's drunk, and then they break up again, and they get back together again, and they get back together. I think that's what, I mean, I may be speaking for, women, at a turn, but I think that may be what they were going for. I mean, would you agree with that?
Maybe, but if that were the case, why is it that Monica and Chandler got married? And that's fine. True. Because like Monica and Chandler were kind of sneaking around for a while, and there was a little bit of that excitement, but then they got married, and well, I would actually argue that was a jump the shark moment for me on Friends when Monica and Chandler got married. And it isn't even so much that event, but it's just I remember the show when they got married, and then like the next season, like the first 5 seasons of Friends, I think had like a pretty strong like emotional center. Mm-hmm. And then there just came a point in the show where I remember thinking like the drama was gone from it, and like they just mined everything for a laugh. Like it, like Chandler and Monica got together, and it was very emotional and very resonant. And then like it just felt like the importance of that just kind of drifted away, and it was all just like, oh my god, like I don't know.
I would agree with you that the quality wasn't there, but there's still some good stuff to be had.
Yeah, for sure.
But back to what you were talking about, your original topic here. Yeah. I was actually going to say Parks and Rec because. Yeah. Do you remember the first maybe 2 seasons had the other guy that Leslie kind of had a romantic relationship with?
Yes.
I don't even know the guy's name, but he left.
Mark.
And they totally retooled that show. If you remember, Andy or Chris Pratt had a much smaller role. And, they brought him in as a larger part of the show, and I think that's what really changed it. Brought in Rob Lowe, brought in Adam Scott. And I think really made a great show out of it.
There's 2 things. So Parks and Rec started as like a mid-season entry, so its first season's only like 6 or 7 episodes.
Yeah.
That season is rough. I actually can go back and watch it, and I actually think there's funny stuff to be had, but it definitely played a lot closer to like The Office or like The Office season 1, where it could be kind of dark and a little uncomfortable. And I should note, Chris Pratt had some of the biggest laughs in that season, and he was only like a guest star. Season 2, just the beginning of season 2, the retooling you're talking about happened then, because like even in like the colors of the show were brighter.
Yeah.
And the like Leslie Knope kind of, even though she was always kind of like a weird sort of socially awkward person, she started transitioning out of that like over the course of that season to like being a more functional kind of person by the end of that season, and then definitely in the season.
I'll be honest, man. I gave up on that show, like season 1, and I started watching again, later on, probably season 2, sometime there, and it was totally different, much better. I don't know if they changed writers or what, but I was a huge fan of Amy Poehler, or still am, and that's why I wanted to like that show.
Yeah.
It basically made Chris Pratt a name.
Yeah. So Chris Pratt joined. He was a full cast member in season 2, and he was definitely a bigger part of the cast. And Mark, I think the actor just wanted to leave. Like, I don't know that they got rid of him. I think the actor, because if you go back and you look at like articles and stuff written at that time versus in the final season, which I'll touch on in a moment.
Yeah, I want to get there. Yeah.
Their idea was that when you look at like government, people work in government and then they transition to like private industry, and that doesn't mean they're like, Mark maybe worked across the street, but he was going to work for like a private company now. He wasn't staying with the city government. And so when I read that article, it sounded to me like they had plans that even though the actor wanted to leave, that they might have brought him back for like, maybe like a guest appearance or, a short arc or something. But then when you get to like the final season of the show and they were bringing a lot of characters back, I remember somebody asked Michael Schur, the executive producer, like, what about Mark? How come we haven't seen Mark? And it was like a rare, like quick and sort of very curt answer of like, no, we won't be bringing Mark back, which almost sounds to me like there's maybe a bit of a falling out too with the actor. Like they didn't like how he left, or he did something after the fact, or they just didn't feel like he was important enough. But that always bothered me. It always bothered me that Mark was never brought up again, even to the point that like I was talking earlier about how I thought Parks and Rec has a really good continuity. The show sort of like erased Mark from existence, because remember when Anne had like a bunch of boyfriends and she was going through that like slutty phase, and then she was trying to get out of it, and she's like giving away all of her old boyfriend's stuff like at a swap meet or something. I can't remember what it was exactly. She's got like a box marked for Andy and for Chris, but there's no box for Mark. And even for like some of the other like random dudes we'd seen in like an episode or two, there was no box for Mark. And she spent like the whole second season with him.
Yeah.
And so something happened there, and I don't know, kind of the guy who's interested in like insider Hollywood stuff, I'd like to know about what that was at some point. But
I mean, he was vanilla. It was nothing special about him. The actor, it wasn't a good fit, I don't think.
He was, the thing is that he was playing a straight man.
Yeah.
But they just didn't do enough, because the thing is I think a lot of the stuff that Mark did is what Adam Scott picked up in terms of like him being the guy to kind of like look over at the camera, like what the heck's happening. Adam Scott is the one who picked up a lot of that, but they made Adam Scott's character like quirky and kind of strange in of itself. Whereas like you say, Mark was vanilla. Like he was just there. He worked with them. He was like a ladies man kind of a thing, which like that never seemed to, like they kept talking about how like Mark was a ladies man, but I never really quite saw how that was the case. Just in terms of like the character, he never did anything that seemed particularly charismatic or anything to me. But yeah, no, that I think that is a good example, because it's a good example too of not only did a character leave, but new characters came on, new characters who were fantastic and great, but also the whole show kind of morphed and sort of grew into what it really was, which was so much better. I mean, Parks and Rec is a rarefied show that for most of its run, each season got better. I think like one of the seasons towards the end, it started to misstep a little bit. But for the most part, every season just got better and better, and the comedy was sharper, and the characters were just on point. Like I definitely enjoyed that show start to finish.
I'm a little fuzzy on the ending. I didn't really care for the way they. It's like they did a few time jumps, and it was just kind of odd. It's like they were trying to wrap it all up in like a tight little, let you know what's going to happen in the future without actually going there.
There's a few things that happened. If I remember correctly, there was like a logistical thing. One of them was Amy Poehler like didn't want to be pregnant on the show. She was like, I have kids. I don't want to do that on the show. So like, I don't want to have to be like walking around with a big fake like pregnancy belly and stuff. Like, I don't think that'll be funny, or I just don't want to do it. And also I think they were trying to find a way for them to like have kids, but not really show them. So like, even in the final season, if you think about it, like I think you could count, I think you saw their kids like maybe twice. And it was actually always effective, like play up for a laugh, because they brought in from Saturday Night Live, Rachel Dratch was like their nanny, and I always thought she was pretty funny.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think there was a logistical reason behind that. And the other reason, I think Michael Schur talked about it, where he said, he's like, he thought the show was starting to be formulaic, and that like every season was like, it's like, okay, there's a special project, and then we do this thing, and then it builds, and then I think his whole point was like, after they did the big Unity Festival, he's like, he wasn't really sure how he could top that in terms of like what they would try to achieve in the next season. So from like a story perspective, it sounded like they knew they probably weren't. Well, there was a few things. One, that might have been their series finale. I don't know whether you remember that. That the episode, the season with the Unity Festival ends. The time jump happens, like that's the final scene, where it's like 3 years in the future, and they work for the feds, and Ben's like in city government, and it's like a time jump, and that could have been the series finale. So that's why they did it. But they did it in such a way that if it wasn't the series finale, they had an idea for what they would do in the last season, which is ultimately then what they executed. So again, I can't tell you to like something you don't like, but it just contextually, like that's what was happening.
I mean, you know how it is when you get attached to characters, you get attached to a show. It just felt forced. I guess maybe the word I'm looking for, but
yeah.
Talking about Parks and Rec, man, the funniest part of that show, you remember when Adam Scott, he had lost his job or quit his job, whatever, and he had some time off work, and he created that board game
that had like Cones of Dunshire.
It was hilarious, man. That is so funny.
Yeah, that's the other thing he did is he did that like stop motion thing that like only lasted for like 2 seconds. And I just remember Adam Scott has like a take that just the way he says it is so funny, where he's like, I worked all day on this, and why wasn't it longer? Like the way he says it is just very, very funny. I mean, again, like that's a show that like infinitely rewatchable, because like there's so many jokes happening. And it's also like the extended cast grows, so like there's all these like other zany characters around. I do like, again, that's such a great show. I'm trying to think, because I have a list of some things too. What else do you have? Like, what are some shows that resonated with you when they did kind of like a cast transition?
Oh man, well, the X-Files is kind of a sore spot for me.
I'm glad you brought up the X-Files. Actually, this is one I'd like to talk about. Tell me specifically what you're referring to about it, because they kind of did. There's a couple of things they've done, but what are you referencing?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think Scully left for a little while I think she was having a child,
Yeah, that was like a
Left the show for a
3-episode
little
or
bit.
4-episode arc in like season 2, roughly. But yeah, that happened.
And then Mulder left for a little while. He was probably filming a movie or something. And then Mulder left for good, and they brought in John Doggett, Robert Patrick, and they also brought in oh man, I can't think of her
Monica
name.
Reyes.
Yeah, yeah. And Scully was still there at that point.
Yep.
Gillian Anderson was still there at that point, and then they basically phased Scully out. To tell you the truth, man, I don't like those seasons, so I don't really remember a lot about them. I've only seen them the one time.
So let's set the record straight here. What happened was at the end of season 7, Mulder is abducted.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I think maybe David Duchovny was filming a movie, but he was also trying to like distance himself from the show a bit, I think. So basically what he did was he negotiated a way that he'd like appear in like half the episodes,
Mm-hmm.
and then like kind of like little cameos throughout. So in that season, that's kind of like the one where like that was the first season with John Doggett, because Mulder disappears and the FBI like mobilizes a search team headed up by Robert Patrick to find him. I'm gonna so let's set Monica Reyes aside for a second and season 9. What we're talking about here is season 8. I actually think season 8, and I would encourage you to, if you're ever rewatching the X-Files or you just want to pluck that season out and watch it on its own, that season is actually a lot better than you think it is, and in fact is pretty damn good. And here's why. Well, here's why I think so. Anyway, I'm not. You think what you want, but here's why I think that. For one, it flipped the main paradigm of the show, which was Mulder's the believer, Scully's the skeptic. So here's a situation where already by that point in the show, Scully had seen so much shit. Like, while she couldn't maybe necessarily explain everything, like she'd seen like bat people and all kinds of crazy, like she knew the world was more complicated than she originally did. And now she had to take on the role of like the believer, and John Doggett was the skeptic. But also it just kind of created an interesting like emotional situation, because remember, Scully was pregnant. And I always thought that the hunt for Mulder was really interesting. Like the way that they strung it out and kind of like creating this, like the new plot line with like there are like these super soldiers and some of this other stuff going on. I also just thought some of the like just case of the week episodes with Scully and John Doggett are really good, because Robert Patrick brings like Mulder and Scully were always really polished. Like, because even though like Scully was a skeptic and Mulder was like a believer, like they were both FBI agents. And part of the backstory of Mulder too is that like not only was he an FBI agent, but he was a really talented FBI agent. Like in the early seasons of the show, there's always characters talking about how disappointed they are that like Mulder did what he did, because he should have been in the FBI profiling unit. And he had a really bright future and he's really smart. John Doggett joined the FBI. He was an NYPD. He was an NYPD like police officer, and then he joined the FBI. So he kind of brought. I always thought he was kind of just like a shuffler, like a street smart kind of a cop, less of an FBI agent. And so I just always thought like his take on the episodes, you got like a third point of view, because like how Scully would look at something, how Mulder would look at something. And then this season, Scully's kind of taking the Mulder position, but rather than just getting like a new Scully, you got this different thing entirely. I also just I think Robert Patrick is awesome. So maybe that's my bias, is I like him a lot.
I get all of that, what you said, but
yeah,
I think it's kind of you take Scully in season 1 and she's like, this is all bullshit, nothing's real. And she's the believer. I get all that. And they throw the T-1000 in there, and we're just supposed to be like, all right, great, this is X-Files. It's just as good as it was. I don't like that. I don't like after season, was it 4? Whenever they did the movie in between the seasons, I think
5.
that's when it fell off for me, because I don't think Chris Carter was invested in the show anymore. I think David Duchovny wanted to move on also. Chris Carter was doing other shit. He was doing Millennium. He was doing maybe other shows also. And some of my favorite episodes are in that period of time. But I just feel like that it should have ended because the show now, the new seasons, I think have been great. Not the last season, not so much. The new season, I think, is great. The second of the revival.
Yeah, we can talk about that. I did watch it was funny because when we last talked, I told you I'd watched the premiere, which pissed me off to no end. But then I watched the second episode, which I liked a lot better, and I thought it was a really interesting concept. That's the one with not Langley is like a version of Langley, like his consciousness exists in like a virtual reality, that thing. And so he's like reaching out. It's sort of like he's reaching out from beyond the grave, but that's not really what he's doing because it's like he donated a copy of his consciousness. Anyway, it was just such a unique, interesting story that I liked that. That to me is X-Files, like that's good. But
Yeah.
I don't know, like just Mulder and Scully's characterizations, I'm just finding to be somewhat off. I don't know. Again, we don't need to dive too deep into the X-Files, but
I mean, things have changed. Yeah. So I mean, it's hard to do it. I don't know if they'd only done the one season, I'd say I wish they hadn't done it at all. But I've really enjoyed the past. Have you seen all the episodes?
So I've only seen two. I fully plan to catch up.
Check them out.
But I heard some pretty terrible things about the finale, which is kind of why I haven't really pushed that hard to watch them, because I heard that like the finale like shit the bed.
Well, the finale shit the bed the last season too. I mean, they're doing another season, I think. So,
or at least there's no plans right now because Gillian Anderson, Fox says there are no immediate plans right now to do another season, and Gillian Anderson kind of like made some shitty comments about it too, like on Twitter, kind of like. I'd have to dig it up, or maybe you could look it up, but she sort of made a comment like, yeah, that's probably for the best. Because I think she was not satisfied with what they were doing. But I will say, rather than just dump on the finale, I will say there were some other episodes that I read, I didn't want to get spoiled, so I didn't read too much about them, but I read that there's some other episodes in this newest season that are quite good. And actually like sort of worthy of being X-Files episodes in the sense of like, they tell an interesting story or have a scary monster or kind of deal with some. There was one episode I remember that people were saying is almost like an episode of like Black Mirror in terms
of. It's really good too. It's really good.
Yeah. So like I'm excited to watch that. I'm less excited to see like what they did, the finale or the mythology stuff. But yeah. I would say that just regarding season 8. I also just thought that like the final episodes of season 8, like the final arc, like once Mulder comes back and then dies and then comes back to life because all that happens. I think those episodes are all like really, really exciting. And they tell like a really cool story and it kind of builds and builds and builds to like the birth of Scully's child. And I just think that there's good stuff in there. And if you haven't watched season 8 in a while, I would encourage you to revisit it. Because my opinion a few years ago was the same as yours. Like, man, I think season 8's kind of when it started falling off. But I really liked it. I thought season 8 was great. Season 9 is garbage. And upon a rewatch of season 9, I'm still, if anything, I'm angrier. Because it's like, this is terrible.
I've rewatched probably 3 or 4 times in the past few years up until there. And I always tell myself I'm going to do it, and I get like 1 or 2 episodes in, and I just get discouraged, and I fall asleep, and I'm bored. I don't like it, and I don't know if I can't get past my original distaste because, I mean, the X-Files was a part of me. I grew up with the X-Files. I was 13 when it came out. I grew up with it through junior high and high school and college, and it was a part of my life. And them doing that to me, it really irritated me, and even when the movie came out, I could already feel the quality falling off, in my opinion.
You don't like the movie? The first movie, not the second one. The second one's dog shit.
It's okay. I've warmed up to it a little bit. When you watch it with the 2 seasons on the end of it.
Yeah. I just think, to me, the first movie did as good of a job as it could have done in being like an X-Files story, accessible to like all audiences as it could have done. Like I don't like if that was the story they wanted to tell and they wanted to make an X-Files movie that's for like a broader audience. I thought they did about as well as I expected them to do. I think that movie's pretty exciting, and I think if you are an X-Files fan, I think you get rewarded because for a lot of the X-Files, it's always been, if you think about like those early seasons, like you think there are aliens, and Mulder finds them, and then there's like a storyline about how like, well, no, the aliens were actually manufactured, and it's not real, and it's all kind of like a big conspiracy. So for me, I thought the movie was just really satisfying because it was like, hey, like Mulder finally, like for real. And again, he always believed, but like he with his own eyes, like he's in an alien spaceship. And I thought that like the end of that movie is pretty suspenseful, and I think the aliens are crazy, scary, and cool. So there's just cool stuff I think in that movie, but it is what it is.
I remember being quite the event going to see that. You don't have stuff like that anymore. At least I don't. But
I think the only thing that even maybe comes close is like I was sort of excited to learn that they were going to air like the Game of Thrones like season premiere in IMAX or like in theaters, something like that.
That's cool.
But they don't, but it's not often that like a TV show kind of jumps to the big screen and like that doesn't. If anything, like that's a lot of my frustrations with entertainment right now are about like Marvel and how they fucking can't like have their TV stuff and their movie stuff even acknowledge each other.
You're obsessed with that, man. You keep talking about it.
It just makes me mad. It's like because here I'm gonna get off the topic for a moment. I want to explain myself. Like this isn't just some arbitrary geek thing. I think what the Marvel movies do is really cool, and I like most of the Marvel movies. But like I think in particular, like what the Avengers did, the first Avengers movie, I think it's just really interesting because you had Iron Man was very grounded in like a kind of reality. Like you watch the original Iron Man and you think like it's sort of possible maybe that someone could do this. And especially now, again, that's 10 years ago, but especially now you think like, gosh, someone might actually be able to make his suit or something like it. And then, you got the Hulk, which is a little bit more fantastical. And then Thor is kind of like outer spacey. But when you think of like the broader world that these movies live in, like the public was mostly kind of kept in the dark. Like, yeah, there's Iron Man and yeah, they saw the Hulk, but like Thor was kind of kept quiet. In the Avengers, like literally New York is invaded by aliens, which like think about it just in the context of our world. If one day aliens poured out of the sky, not only is that it's like so not only are aliens real, they're trying to kill us, and then like a bunch of superpower people show up and stop them and like make it all better. To me, that's like a trend. Like the world would be a different place the day after.
Right.
Like just the fact aliens exist, our conception of the universe is now fundamentally changed. And to me, I think what the Marvel shows could have been doing is like exploring some of that. And I don't expect like Thor to show up every episode or, that kind of stuff. But to me, they could have been sort of telling stories in this world where aliens are real. The world has to deal with it, kind of showing us some of the repercussions of the things that happen in the movies instead of just kind of doing their own stories and like, whatever the hell they want to do.
Maybe they just thought that it would just be too much trouble because you've got the WB doing some, and is that the channel? Whatever, like Flash and stuff. Not Flash.
Oh yeah, no, that's the DC Universe stuff.
Is it all DC stuff over there? Okay, that's all DC stuff. Well, I know you got
Marvel's got Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC, and then they have a bunch of shows on Netflix. And now they actually have a show on Hulu, and I think they have another show coming out on like Freeform. So they're in a few more places.
Which I've seen whatever the one on Hulu is called. I've seen a few episodes, and it's interesting.
The Runaways, I think.
Yeah, I want to finish watching that.
Yeah. So I understand that logistically it's hard, but the other thing is, if they just kind of went to it like, listen, we're making these shows. Yes, they take place in the bigger universe, but listen, making movies is on a different schedule. TV shows are on a different thing. No, Jay. No, they got in our face, hashtag, it's all connected, and we're like playing that up and talking about all this crap with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and, oh man, hey, Thor was just here in London. And then just like all the, I also have a hard time feeling bad for people that are making trillions and trillions of dollars to figure out the logistics to have their TV and movie universes sync up. Like, they could do it. It's not impossible. But the fact of the matter is, the Kevin Feige and the guy who does TV, Ike Perlmutter, are having a pissing contest. They don't like each other. So they just do, like, they, again, they sort of have to be frenemies. But it just fucking annoys me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take us down that path. But I didn't want you to just think I'm just like some geeky guy and it's like I'm always bitching about that. It comes from a real place.
Well, and you're a fan of both.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I was a fan of both. I'm mostly in the movies now. Like, I haven't watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in a while. And I'm fucking pissed off that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. mentioned Thanos and seemed like they were building up to the end of Infinity War, which is pretty freaking crazy. And then they didn't do it. It basically it sort of ends before the movie ends is their answer. But I'm just like, the fuck, man? Like, that would have been so awesome if you did that. Like, it would have I would have finally felt like, okay, you're throwing me a bone a little bit. And I even just read an article today. I think it was actually just this afternoon, not long before we got on here. Somebody was saying, like, one of the reasons that they didn't include. By the way, did you see Avengers: Infinity War?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I need to go back and watch some of the other movies to kind of refresh my memory.
Did you haven't been spoiled? Do you know what happens? Do you not know what happens?
I know someone dies. That's all I know.
Okay. Well, then I don't want
really
to.
care about
I'm not gonna. Well, no. This is like, you really want to see this movie without spoilers. So I'm not gonna say anything. What I am going to say. Big things happen in this movie. World-changing events happen in this movie that the TV shows they have to acknowledge them. Is basically my point.
Yeah.
And so Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. sort of skirted around it by saying, like, oh, well, we ended our finale before that event in the movie. It's like, okay, you fucking jerks, fine. And then their next season doesn't actually air until next summer. So maybe Avengers 4 will do something next May to get them out of having to deal with it and actually, coordinate things. But the Netflix stuff, I'm already setting myself up for disappointment. They're not going to do anything. And it pisses me off because I think it would be wonderful material to explore. Like, basically, the thing that happens in the movie would have to affect the Netflix shows. It has to. Like, there's no way around it. Like, the thing that happens is so big, they would have to acknowledge that it happened, and frankly, it would impact, like, the characters in their show. And the article I read, which is what got me started on this line of thought, is they were debating about putting the Netflix characters like Luke Cage and Daredevil in Avengers. And then they said, well, and then because we're going to do what we're going to do, like, because of kind of what happens in the movie, we thought, well, if we put them in the movie, like, their shows, like, I don't know if it's realistic that their shows would, like, be able to, like, kind of reflect that. So we just thought it was cleaner, like, not to include them. All the while, my brain's exploding out of my body. Because, like, that was there is a scene, Jay, and again, this isn't spoiler, it's in some of the trailers.
Right.
There's, like, a big fight scene in New York City. And, like, our heroes are kind of getting their asses handed to them. Wouldn't it have been great if, like, fucking Luke Cage marched on the scene and, like, dealt some damage and Jessica Jones kind of popped up? Like, I'm not even expecting them to, like, follow the characters onto the more fantastical things. Like, no one says they had to leave New York City. But it's like, there's like freaking aliens in New York City, and we've got a bunch of superpowered people that live here. Spider-Man freaking jumps off his school bus to go help. Why wouldn't they come over there? When it starts to, like, break the logic of the universe, like, that they've built, that's why it bothers me. It doesn't make sense to me that they wouldn't get involved. It's maddening. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take a breath. But this is my position.
It's all good. Very.
It
applies.
Yes. So,
so on to Cheers.
Well, again, Cheers is I think, when you look at like MASH might be another example of this, but Cheers, I think, is kind of the quintessential show where a character departure, a big one, kind of impacts the show. And I think Cheers is also notable because not only did that happen, but there are some, I don't know whether I'm one of them, but there are some who argue that, well, why am I dancing around it? This is like a 40-year-old show. So yeah, Shelley Long was the waitress, Diane Chambers, in the first 5 seasons of Cheers. She and Sam Malone had like an on again, off again romance. They were going to get married, then they didn't. Then they're fighting. Then they like hate each other. And I think I've actually talked about it on this show that, watching that show like today, there's some stuff like I just don't think they get away with, because
Really?
some of the fights between Sam and Diane are really raw. And I just have to think that like Sam Malone, who was like a very likable character that, like the people making it wanted audiences to love, in the era of like Me Too, I think Sam would have been gaslit. Like, I don't think they would have gotten away with what they did. But in any case, Diane was a member of, she was a staff member in the bar. They were in love. She was a big part of the show. Shelley Long wanted to leave Cheers. I can't remember if it was just a money thing or she was frustrated or what it was, but she wanted to leave. They weren't about to end the show. And so she leaves. And then the following season, like, they have to deal with, okay, this is now Cheers, but Shelley Long is gone. And what do? And the show hired Rebecca Chambers. Or sorry, not the show. That's the character, Rebecca Chambers, played by Kirstie Alley. And the point that I was driving to before I wanted to give just a brief explanation is that there are some people who argue that the Rebecca Chamber years of Cheers are better. That the show was actually better when she was around.
We have a lot more episodes.
I agree with that, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jay.
I was gonna say you have a lot more with her.
There's a whole Diane was only 5 seasons, and so Cheers ran 11 seasons. Rebecca's got 6 seasons to Diane's 5, so that's certainly true. But what's interesting is that, like, for me, it's almost apples and oranges to some extent. I mean, yeah, it was a sitcom, and it didn't fundamentally change, but it felt like the show was very much centered around the Sam and Diane romance. And when she left, Sam was still the main character, but it felt like the story opened up in a lot of interesting ways. And, kind of the plot initially is that, Kirstie Alley is a manager running the bar because Sam was so kind of distraught over what happened with Diane. He sells the bar. And so now Sam has to come back to the bar, at least sort of in the initial seasons, and he's just working there. Like, he's the bartender. And he, Rebecca's his boss, and there's all kinds of other zany antics and things that go on. And what's interesting too is that, Sam and Rebecca, they don't really get together as a couple. Whereas, that was kind of immediately what Sam was trying to do with Diane. True to Sam's character, it's not like he doesn't try, and they do dance around that. But I think when you kind of look at the Diane versus Rebecca years, Rebecca was a lot more like, like Sam's sister. Or like a close friend, and so Cheers is just a good example of a show that not only carried off a major character change, but also carried off sort of a major shift in what the show was. So that's sort of my summary of it. What did you think about it, Jay?
It's been many years since I've watched Cheers. I've been meaning to go back to it and watch it again from start to finish. But I've never particularly liked Shelley Long, and I think the consensus when it came out is that she wanted to leave the show to pursue other endeavors. She wanted to be a Hollywood actress. Yep. And what did she do? She goes and makes Troop Beverly Hills, and
right.
And she's a huge star now. So that never happened.
Right.
But basically falls away and nobody ever talks about her again. And
she was in the Brady Bunch movie. That was after Cheers.
But I always liked the show post Diane anyway.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time since I've seen those early episodes.
Yeah. I somewhat have an advantage on you in that remember I don't know, 6 months or so ago, or whenever it was. Like my wife and I did like a big Cheers watch through, so we watched through all the seasons of the show. I mean, I think this went all the way through like last summer, and because there's 11 seasons and like 20, there's like 24 or 25 episodes a season, so it took us a bit. But yeah, I always sort of liked it. It's maybe that's sort of why it's hard for me to say that I thought one version was better than the other. I was just impressed at how there's a couple of things about it that I want to mention in light of some of the other things that we could talk about. So when Diane left the show, the thing that I liked is it's not like she was forgotten. I mean, clearly her character left a mark on Sam in the sense that like she sort of like puts him in the position he's in when it comes back. But when it's organic to the story or it makes sense, like characters refer to her, they talk about her. I mean, frankly, it's played up as like a punchline sometimes, where like Carla, will make a reference to her that's like it's like a big laugh.
Yeah.
And I want to mention that because another show that had a big character change was The Office. And The Office is a show that I very much love. I really do. But I truly believe, and the more that I rewatch it, I only become firmer in this belief that they really did fumble the seasons after Michael left, and particularly even fumbled in their finale. Because while I think their finale is largely really nice and beautiful and, definitely gets me emotional despite my problem here, Michael was the center of the show. He touched every character on the show. I mean, even just in an annoying way, but like he was so in everybody's lives and in everybody's face. It was just jarring to me how Steve Carell leaves, the character Michael Scott leaves the show, and they seem to go out of their way not to talk about him. And I have examples of this. Like there are a couple talking heads in like the episodes of the season where Michael leaves, because remember that's not the season finale of that year. That was like 4 episodes or so later. But there's like a couple talking heads with like Ryan and Stanley where they don't say like they something to the effect of like, I worked for the last boss for 15 years, or with the last boss this, like, say Michael. Like what do you mean the last boss? Like we know who you're talking about.
I think it's kind of a wink, isn't it? It's kind of an inside joke, I guess.
If it is, you're giving them more credit than I do. I don't know if that's what they're doing at all.
Well,
but,
I mean, I don't know why they would tiptoe around that. I mean, it's no.
I think it's a case where I think they were so worried about what the show was going to be without Michael that they overcompensated by trying to just not remind people of him at all. That's what I think. I'm not sure whether they would ever admit that, but just to me, the evidence is there. Because like there's those instances in the dialogue, and then they do bring him up. Like again, there's actually kind of a funny joke in the premiere of the following season when you find out that Andy is the new boss, where you see Pam is pregnant again. She's like, little Michael Scott, like that. Like that's a funny joke. Like and like I appreciated it, but then it just so here's another big one. When in the final season, when they talk about Jan, because remember there's kind of like a plot where
that's a great plot too.
Yeah, where like she now is like running marketing or something for the Yellow Pages, or sorry, for the White Pages, and she's trying to dunk on David Wallace for firing her.
Right.
But Pam and Dwight go, and it's all kinds of madness ensue.
And Dwight Jr. gets to spend the week with
yes,
Jan.
That's right. And when Pam is kind of catching the audience up on who Jan is, which I think is sort of annoying in the first place, she doesn't even mention Michael at all. She's just kind of like, Jan is this crazy person who used to work here, and the fact that like you wouldn't mention Michael in that description, that to me, that's all the evidence I need that they were going out of their way not to talk about him. Because I don't know how you talk about Jan without mentioning Michael.
Yeah, I don't know why either one. I don't know why they would have done that, but I mean, you just need to remember people are stupid, and maybe they're assuming a lot of people may not remember who Michael is, 3 episodes later.
I mean, maybe. But the only
That's
reason
all
I
I
don't
can
buy
think of.
that is because people were always asking the writers and the producers, like, hey, is Michael coming back for the final season? And it's all, I don't know. But, like, it just. And then there is the finale of The Office where Michael does come back. But to me, similar to my rant just a moment ago, and I'll try and keep my cool, Jay. I hope you don't think I'm yelling at you.
Oh,
This is
you and
just
I
like
have different opinions on this, so go ahead.
I think we do, but well, because your opinion is more like, you know, they couldn't get him back, so they did the best they could, and I actually agree with that. Like, I agree. Like, Steve Carell kind of didn't want to do what I wanted him to do, and so this was the best that they could do. I acknowledge that, but what I'm talking about is more of like in a hypothetical story fashion. If anything, I'm like slamming Steve Carell, because what I
Yeah,
am saying
absolutely.
is that the character of Michael Scott in The Office, for as much as he might have matured over the course of his years there, and however much he might have matured when we didn't see him, when he was, he finally has a family, he's finally got some happiness in his life, that guy doesn't change that much. So I just have a hard time believing that he's going to come back into town and not be mugging for the camera and not be causing problems and not be like in everybody's face. Now, I think there was like a nuanced and artful way they could have done it, but they just kept talking about like, well, we didn't want to overshadow the finale for everybody else. Like, okay, but you can't bend your characters into shapes that they don't actually take. You know what I mean? Like, Michael Scott is who he is, and it's just not realistic that, like, he wasn't even in the question and answer session, Jay. Like, maybe he wouldn't be all mugging for the camera. Maybe he wouldn't have caused problems at Dwight's wedding. Fine, but he wasn't at the question and answer session, for the documentary. Like, I don't bullshit. I don't believe that. I mean, even when he leaves, he says, "Hey, let me know if this is going to air," which to me
Yeah.
was like the perfect tag for like, "Hey, bring me back."
I mean, yeah, in a perfect world, it would have been great, but Steve Carell didn't want to do it anymore. I mean,
Yeah,
so what choice do they have? I mean,
they
but
they certainly
that
did a decent job. Again, they
that
worked around what Steve Carell would do, and I give them that
that
credit.
that show could have done another 5 seasons with their cast without Steve Carell and good writing. I'm confident in that because that was one of the best ensemble comedy cast ever.
I think, wow, I think you and I differ on that. While
You
season
think that
nine,
Steve Carell made or break?
no,
Was
I
the
don't. I don't
difference in
think
that
he.
show?
I don't think he made or.
Bro, here we go.
Steve Carell being on The Office doesn't make or break it necessarily, except that, to me, season 8 is a dumpster fire. Season
I
9,
agree.
I
I
think,
agree.
actually got back to
Yeah,
be
I agree.
like season 9. I actually think if season 8 had been what season 9 was, I think I would have a more optimistic outlook on what future potential seasons could have been. But because season 8 was so bad, I think season 9 was only good the way that it was is because they knew they were ending it. So they were willing to take some chances in the story with the characters to move some things along that kind of made things better than they might have otherwise been. So what I'm saying is, like, I think the fact that it was the final season kind of it influenced their hand a little bit. I mean, again, it is what it is. It's
Give
a
them
good
some.
season, but yeah,
They had some freedom. You're saying.
right.
Sure. I mean, I agree with that, but I think that if they had not tried to, essentially find another Michael, that's what they
Yeah.
were trying to do. Focus on the boss. And if they had not even really focused on that so much and just went along with Jim, Pam, Dwight, Ryan, Kelly, which Kelly left the show at some point along there. I think
Kelly
to
and
go to their own
Ryan were
show.
both gone in the final season.
So, but I mean, I think that all of those characters could have, all those actors, and if the writers were still focused on what they were doing, I think it still could have been a good show for a few more seasons. They were all trying to find what's the next thing we're going to do because they know it's running out.
Yeah.
They're trying to get the farm going, the Shroot Farms and stuff. So.
Okay, and this is going to take me off topic for a moment, but the farm thing actually pissed me off because
Oh yeah.
they created an episode of The Office as like a backdoor pilot for a spinoff, like for Dwight. And when that didn't work, I remember there being an interview with Paul Lieberstein, so Toby, but one of the writers and producers.
Love Toby.
And he basically made a comment like, yeah, when the farm didn't take off, we basically like rejiggered what we were doing with Dwight and Angela and got them together. And I remember thinking like, what, are you kidding me? Like, first off, why? If why wouldn't you have just gotten Dwight? Like, why couldn't Angela be on that show? Like, what the hell? Like, I don't understand why. Because to be honest, Dwight and Angela being together, to give the kudos to the finale that you are, I will say them getting together was a very satisfying, very kind of like brought a lot of emotional closure, I thought, to the show, because they were kind of a will they won't they sort of situation, and they finally got together in those final episodes. And when like Dwight proposes to her, screaming through the bullhorn, like that scene, like my wife cries like almost every time we watch that. Like it's a great scene, it's a great relationship. Mm. The fact that they wouldn't have done it just because they were going to spin Dwight into his own show, I think is ludicrous.
But you're talking about people making millions of dollars potentially versus not. That's why they don't give a shit about the product. I mean, that's the problem.
I believe that's true in some cases. I genuinely do, but I don't know that that's true in all cases, and I'm not sure that's even true necessarily in the case of The Office. Like those writers did seem to care, despite my criticisms of them. They definitely seem to care about the characters and the stories and tried to do good things. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there. Go ahead.
That farm episode is like, you could so see what they're trying to set up, Yeah. And it's so horribly obvious. And I mean, we all know, what are the chances of this show working? What are the chances of it actually being a hit? I mean, look at Joey. Look at I mean, so many shows that try to continue on. I mean, there's like maybe a handful that actually win a few seasons and we're okay.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think the problem is like on a Dwight show, you don't really have like a straight man.
Exactly. I
think
everybody's what the kid was. That stupid little straight-laced kid.
Yeah, the kid, or maybe even Dwight's sister. Like she was kind of quasi-normal. Yeah.
And then, I forget the actor's name, but the guy from Silicon Valley.
Yeah, he's his brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The pot farmer.
Yeah. So at least in from my view, and it sounds like you differ, The Office is a show that had a character departure, but I don't think they handled it as well.
No, absolutely. I don't disagree that they didn't handle it very well. I mean, James Spader is hard to watch sometimes on that show.
Like that's like the James Spader stuff really starts to jump the shark. Like there's just a lot of stuff in that 8th season that it's just like, I don't know. There's sort of like, there is one scene that I actually think is actually pretty funny, but if the shark hadn't been jumped in the show already, the scene did it. And it's where after Andy comes back in that awful plot line, where just like Nellie just like takes over that's the other thing I freaking hate about that season. That
really made me really angry.
Yeah, that annoys me. But where like you find out like Andy couldn't like perform for Aaron, and like Robert California's like, okay, let's go around the room, all the men. What is the best erection you've ever had? He says something like that, and I remember like Jim just goes like, Toby, do you have anything to say here? And Toby's just like, I can't do anything. Like HR is a joke.
Yeah.
It's like that's a funny bit, but
I mean, like all these people were probably ready to go on and do other things anyway. I'm sure Jenna Fisher and John Krasinski were already thinking about leaving anyway.
Yeah. Well, that was actually what's funny is season 8, the finale of that. There was an open question about whether or not there would even be a season 9, if you remember that, because John Krasinski, Jenna Fisher, and I think Andy, what's his face?
Yeah, he was becoming a big star. Yeah,
he was a big star too. Like I think those 3, all their contracts were up, and they hadn't, like, I think when season 8 ended, they still hadn't signed yet. And so there was kind of like a big question of like, is there even going to be a season 9? Because like you have to think they're going to want big money now. And so that I think is another reason why they only did one more season.
Yeah.
I think they probably realized that it was time, but I also think, you know, they were having to dole out big money to these guys, and they were like, we don't think it's worth it. The ratings are on the decline anyway.
Yeah. Shit, what's his name? Anyway, when Andy was off on his cruise or his little boat trip with his brother,
yeah,
I think he was actually filming Hangover 2.
I think it was Hangover 3.
Was it 3? Wow.
Yeah.
And they were churning those out, didn't they?
Yeah, it was like one every year, I think. But
wow.
Yeah, that is what he was doing. That's why he was gone. And frankly, I think that's even why when he came back, like, he was all tanned and stuff, because like he was filming in like Las Vegas and stuff. So they just sort of worked it into the character. But that's the other thing I just can't forgive The Office for, like completely driving Andy's character into the ground. Andy's character is so fun I love him. Like when he shows up in season 3, like his interactions with Jim and then eventually him and Dwight, and I just think he's really funny. And just I like the actor, but the way they just kind of like mash him in and ruin him, I don't know. That always bothered me too.
Yeah, it's kind of odd, but I guess he's got to be the scapegoat. He's got to be the one that they, poke fun at.
Yeah.
I'll always quote, will you beer me that water over there?
Yeah.
It gets a laugh like a third of the time.
Lord, beer me strength. Yeah. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
There's some like, and that comes from a season 3 episode. In my mind, The Office in seasons 2 and 3 was the height of its power. There is tons of funny stuff after that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking like the later the later Michael seasons, but to me, season 3, I just like hardcore belly laughs.
Yeah.
Like Prison Mike. That Prison Mike scene, it's hard to watch it and like hear all the jokes just because like you're laughing so hard. And I've seen it how many times now? Yeah. I still think it's really funny.
That's definitely an all-time comedy show for me. I can put that on at any time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't have many of those either. So
right.
It's like Seinfeld, The Office, maybe Friends sometimes. Friends probably not so much anymore.
Yeah.
But Seinfeld and The Office.
So I think, God, I mean, Jay, I think we could go on forever, but the only other thing the only other thing I wanted to mention is because we talked a lot about Buffy and Angel. They had pretty big cast changes over the course of their shows simply because, part of the way through Buffy, they spun Angel off into his own show and he took Cordelia with him, the character of Cordelia Chase with him. And while Cordelia was the only major character that came with him, later in the first season, he was a secondary character on Buffy, but he grew to be probably one of the best characters in TV history. Wesley Wyndham Price came over from Buffy to Angel. He appeared in season 3 of Buffy in kind of the back half as kind of a replacement for Giles.
Yeah.
And then he fell out of favor and some things happened and he ended up on Angel. And I actually thought those shows for the most part, well, at least in the case of Buffy, that was a pretty big change. Because not only was it the end of their high school years, but they lost Angel, they lost Cordelia. And then, the characters are like going to college. I actually thought Buffy handled it pretty well, but I do think that the beginning of season 4, and actually I think season 4 overall isn't my favorite. It's kind of rough. I think that it suffers from having a really sucky villain. But I do think like the first few episodes of Buffy season 4 are a little off, but I think they quickly recover, and adding Spike to the cast like they eventually do and getting him in the mix like makes for like all-time great watching, great TV watching. And then over the course of
Anya as well.
Oh gosh, yeah, Anya. And Anya too is a character that grew from like humble beginnings. Yeah. She was kind of just like a demon that Cordelia summoned in season 3, and then later comes back. And then she's kind of a main character on the show. And yeah, she might be my wife's favorite character, honestly.
Really?
Like she's just very funny.
She's so like ditzy. She just says the first thing that comes to her mind.
Yes. I think a lot of people say she's kind of a Cordelia replacement, and I don't think that's a fair comparison, but I can see why they say that. Like she certainly fills a gap that Cordelia did in terms of like the one person in the room who's going to like say what they're thinking. Because actually,
Sure.
there's an episode of Buffy season 3 where it's actually the episode that I believe got delayed because of Columbine. The one where Buffy like obtains like mind reading powers, and she can hear one of the students wants to like kill everybody. And in the there's a scene where like Buffy kind of realizes what's happening to her, and she can read everybody's thoughts, and she kind of like goes around the room. And it's like, Giles is like, oh man, I think she's in trouble. And Xander's like, oh man, I hope she can't like see what I'm thinking. And then Cordelia is like, she says something, like she goes, I'm bored. Can we go? And then her thought is, I'm bored. Can we go? like her thought, what she's saying is exactly what she's thinking, which I just thought was a funny touch.
In season 1, they were kind of, they weren't. She wasn't like a main cast member in that she was friends with Buffy when they first started. Her character was kind of her adversary at the school, her competition, if you will.
For sure, she was like a school bully.
Yeah.
Kind of an antagonist character. Yeah, absolutely, she was. I mean, she was a main cast member in the sense she was in the main cast, but like she wasn't like part of their gang.
Yeah.
Like like she became eventually. Yeah, and even Giles leaves the show. Like in season, again, we were talking about season 6 earlier. Giles left Buffy after a few episodes in season 6, and then he came back briefly, like when he like Buffy was alive, but then he left again, and he was gone pretty much until the finale. And he's in a lot more of season 7, but he still is only in maybe half of those episodes, maybe a little more than that.
Didn't he come back when her mom died or something?
Well, so her mom died in season 5. He was still there for that.
Okay. I'm trying to remember. He came back for some reason, didn't
he? He came back because Buffy was alive. He basically decided to leave, because Anthony Stewart Head he was kind of tired of spending like half his time in Los Angeles. He wanted to live in like England, where he's from. But the character was like, Buffy's dead. I failed. There's really no reason for me to be here. You guys are all grown-ups. I kind of need to move on with my life. So he just left. And then when Willow calls him and tells him Buffy's alive, he comes back. But then once Buffy's like alive for a little while, he leaves again, sort of under the he basically says to her, he's like, you're using me as a crutch. Like I have to go because like there are some things you need to do yourself that if I'm here because I love you, like I'm going to keep doing them for you. So I have to leave to help you and to help me, basically. But then he comes back and faces off with Willow. He's got like magic powers, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that it was a cool episode. I just don't know how did he all of a sudden turn into a wizard.
Oh, well, if you remember, it was explained that because he could tell, I don't know how I remember these details. It's like you get me going, and it's like the wheels start turning, and I remember that because Willow was growing so powerful, in England, there's like, kind of like how there's like the Watchers Council, there was like an official like coven of witches, like that were sort of like in charge of the world, or like some deeply rooted group. They could feel Willow's power growing, or they could feel like a great power growing, and Giles knew it was Willow. So he went to them and they like imbued him with their strength or something. And it was just a temporary, and eventually Willow just like kicks the shit out of him anyway and like wipes it away from him. But that was what happened there. Sorry.
Yeah.
Again, we need to do like a Buffy specific episode. Like
we do
talk about that for sure.
Yeah, Dark Willow. It's a pretty good plot line.
Yeah. Before we end though, I don't want to leave Angel out in the cold, because Angel had a number of cast changes too. Like in Angel's first season, the primary cast was originally Angel, Cordelia, and his first like partner, a guy named Doyle, who's played by actor Glenn Quinn, who also from Roseanne. And Glenn Quinn, the backstory on this is always fuzzy to me because Joss Whedon sometimes says like the plan was always that Glenn Quinn was only going to be a temporary character, but then you read other stuff. Glenn Quinn had like a substance abuse problem. He was into some drugs, and ultimately he died. And ultimately, I think that's what it was. It was like an overdose or something. So I almost think that they hired him, they brought him aboard, they could see there was like a problem, and maybe he asked off, or maybe they decided he should leave, and then they kind of engineered like an ending for him. And it's actually, Doyle actually has a pretty good arc, like a beginning, a middle, and an end, actually. So it's funny, like his story only lasts about like 13 episodes or so, but I actually think he plays out a pretty full character arc. So he was the first to leave, and eventually that's when Wesley shows up and kind of fills that other spot on Angel's squad. And then officially in season 2, but kind of starting a little bit at the end of season 1, Angel starts working with the character Gunn, who becomes a main character from seasons 2 through to the end. He was kind of like running like a gang of like human vampire hunters or defenders in LA. They were kind of like in the ghetto of LA, and the police and people couldn't help them, but they were kind of like fighting against like the vampire threat.
Man, I didn't realize he was dead.
Who? Glenn Quinn?
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, what's funny is in so the other sort of character departure, the Cordelia left after season 4. She was in like a coma and then came back for like one episode. What's funny is, and I'm going to get back to your comment about Glenn Quinn, but the whole Cordelia not being in the show anymore, after the revelations about what happened with Joss Whedon and like him cheating on his wife and like fooling around with like members of the cast, I kind of find myself wondering like if he fooled around with her, and that's part of why she got like booted off the show. Like maybe there was an issue there, but I don't know. I have no idea. That's never been said, but I just remembered thinking that when Cordelia got written off the show, it just seemed so arbitrary. It was kind of just like, I don't know. It just seemed very strange that all of a sudden Cordelia wasn't going to be on the show. And they made it seem like, well, there wasn't anywhere else for her character to go. But that feels to me kind of like a dodge. But in any case, in the episode where Cordelia comes back, which was also Angel's 100th episode, it's like the first time they refer to the character of Doyle in several seasons. And Cordelia's line is something like, it pissed me off so much going out like that. And I remembered reading something like the writers kind of wrote that kind of like about like they're sort of talking about Glenn Quinn, not Doyle. Like, they were kind of close with him when they knew him, and that they were kind of mad that, he, kind of went out the way that he did.
Yeah, so she basically got kicked off the show. Because I don't really see.
Basically, yeah. I mean, you can dig around, and I've looked around for years, and like all you can really find is some interviews where. What's interesting is like you read interviews with Joss Whedon, and like Joss Whedon says stuff like, "We really took her character as far as it could go," which that's the part that sounds like a dodge. When she's asked about it, she is kind of just like, I guess they just, it's like, clearly she didn't want to go. So like, it really feels to me like there was something else going on there. And so maybe
so she probably signed an NDA or something.
I have again, this is conjecture. I don't know. Nobody has told me these things. It's more that I'm just like, I remember when she didn't come back for season 5, that really pissed me off because I actually thought like on Angel, Cordelia's character like really grew and changed and like did some really cool stuff. Kind of like Wesley. Yeah. Like on Buffy, she was always kind of one note. Like they sort of peeled back the layers of her onion to some extent, but on Angel, she really got to like be a different, like she got to grow and do some other stuff. While Wesley became just like a complete and utter badass. Like Wesley's character arc is like one of the best in TV history, I think. So it just bothered me that just all of a sudden she wasn't going to be there, and it just felt like it was all without ceremony. It's just like the way season 4 ends. It's also abrupt. Like Angel finds Cordelia, and she's still like in a coma. And it's I don't want to belabor it, but I was unsatisfied by it. Now, having said that, season 5 of Angel is actually quite good, and the sort of the final major cast change, sort of, and there's sort of a flavor on that is the addition of Spike. Actually, I'm sorry, there was a character played by Amy Acker who played Fred, who appeared. She joined the cast in season 3 of Angel. I shouldn't gloss over that, but sort of her arrival just wasn't really that dramatic. She just kind of showed up. Whereas Spike came and kind of like Buffy had ended the year before, and so Spike came and I think kind of really jazzed up the show a little bit. And Joss Whedon said in an interview once, which I thought was really funny, that he finally found a couple on the show that worked, and that was Angel and Spike.
Absolutely.
Like just those guys playing off each other in the 5th season is so good. Like the episode where they go to Italy is one of the best episodes of like the entire Buffy verse. It's so good.
So
do you remember what I'm talking about? That one?
I don't think I ever saw it. I didn't ever watch a whole lot of Angel, so I need to go catch up.
Oh man, okay. I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry if I'm spoiling stuff. I thought you
I watched it on and off. I was just never a fan.
Okay.
So Spike came onto that show. Is that after Buffy was already done?
Yeah. So Buffy. So actually, what was kind of cool is that even though Angel was still on the WB and Buffy was on UPN, Joss Whedon like talked to the folks at like the WB and was like, "Hey guys, listen, like we're ending Buffy. Could you do us a solid? Can we do some crossovers a little bit again? Like it would really help us out." And so in season 4 of Angel, Willow comes onto Angel for like a couple episode arc. Mm-hmm. And so does Faith, because Faith was on Angel, and then like Angel put her in jail. Like she finally agreed to be like held in jail for murdering people and being bad.
Right.
And then if you remember the plot line of the final season of Buffy is that there's those guys trying to kill all this like the Slayer potentials. Well, those guys also come after Faith being a Slayer. Mm-hmm. And so like on an episode of Angel, one of those guys with one of those knives tries to kill her in prison, and she, kills him and saves him. And also at the same time, that was when, as part of this whole like plot about like the big long story about like this big beast and all this other stuff going on, to fight, like because they had to release Angelus. Like they basically needed Willow to remove his soul, and then like Angelus got out, and so they needed like Willow. I'm sorry. They found a different way to remove his soul, but that's what they needed Willow for. They needed to bring Willow into town because she was the only person who'd ever actually done it before. Because in season 2 of Buffy, she's the one who like does the spell that like puts his soul back in right before mm-hmm. Buffy has to kill him, because that's just classic Joss Whedon. So Willow came over to Angel for like an episode or two, and then she brought Faith, because Wesley broke Faith out to help them stop Angelus. She brought Faith from Angel back to Sunnydale to help in like the final arc of Buffy. I'm sorry, I was maybe longer with that than I needed to be, but yeah. And so then after Buffy ended, Spike kind of appeared on Angel, and he was kind of there with the main cast for that season. And I thought pretty cool. Like again, I thought it like brought new dimensions to his character. I thought that it brought a lot of stuff up with him and Angel that was pretty cool. And it was just kind of neat to see him playing off of some of the other characters, because I think a show can kind of get stale. And Angel season 5, if you didn't watch it, maybe you didn't know, like Angel season 5 like completely retooled itself.
Really?
Like, the big like law firm that Angel had been kind of like, they were like Angel's nemesis throughout the whole part of the show. They had been like destroyed over the course of like the season. And then like at the end of the season, Angel like defeats the big bad villains, and he like the law firm just sort of appears again, and it's because it's like it's like not it's like a demon front. It's like a supernatural organization, like evil things run it basically or whatever. But they basically say to Angel, like, you know what, you win. Like you survived, you defeated this big evil. We want you to run our firm for us. And so they put Angel in charge of like Wolfram and Hart, and
Right.
so they can, he can like fight evil on a global scale, kind of a thing. Oh, but the thing I was leading to is that in addition to sharing faith, remember Angel's in the last episode of Buffy.
Was he show up there at the end?
Yeah, it's actually really cool because like Angel is fighting Malcolm Reynolds from Firefly. Because remember he plays that really awesome priest villain, and basically like Buffy's like fighting him, and she kind of gets in some trouble, and all of a sudden this like fist comes out of nowhere and like knocks him out, and it's Angel, and like he helps her a little. And then like Angel gets like knocked out, and Buffy kills him, but it also gave a way to get Spike onto Angel because like Angel got that necklace that Spike uses at the end of the episode to basically like wipe out all the bad guys.
Right.
But it basically kills him too. But that necklace was given to Angel by the law firm. And I think what's weird is that the season never really explored it, so it kind of remained a little too ambiguous for my taste. But Wolfram and Hart gave it to Angel. And I think their intention was that he would use it. So that what happened to Spike actually happened to Angel, and they'd like have him, but instead it happened to Spike, and I don't know, it was a whole thing. But again, good stuff. I could talk about Buffy and Angel forever, but I think we're on like hour 3 here. I think it would probably be a good idea to wrap it up. What do you have any final thoughts, Jay? Is there any show like that kind of a big cast change that we didn't talk about that you'd like to kind of leave us with?
I know we're probably leaving quite a few out.
Oh, for sure, without a doubt.
I don't think there was any that I didn't mention already, but
Yeah.
What about like we can name some of the biggest? Like, didn't they change Darren's on Bewitched?
Right. Yeah. You really go back, and that's exactly right. It's like the character of Darren was played by 2 different guys over the course of the show.
They're just like nothing happened. Just all right, put a new guy in there.
I actually remember, and I wish they had done this. I think it would have been really bold and interesting. Remember that awful Bewitched movie that Will Ferrell was in with who was it? I don't remember who.
Nicole Kidman.
It was Nicole Kidman. She played her. I remember I had read that it was either in a script or it was just kind of something that they bounced around as they thought it'd be a funny thing to do, that if they were going to make the Bewitched movie, what they would do is they were going to hire 2 Darrens. And that the idea I heard was that like Will Ferrell would play him for the first half of the movie, but then like Jim Carrey would play him for the second half of the movie.
Brilliant.
And they wouldn't, it just like, one scene would end and it would be Will Ferrell, and then another scene it would be Jim Carrey, but they wouldn't like say anything. It would they would do what the show did, basically.
Again, people are stupid, and they may not even get the joke.
I know. I think it's a missed opportunity. I think that would have been great.
I think it would have been really funny. I mean, I haven't seen the movie. I've heard it's not that great.
Oh, it's terrible. Like that. Yeah. Again, they played it very safe. It's kind of a lame story. But when I was first hearing about it, that was one of the ideas, and I actually thought that would have been pretty clever. See, this is that thing of like shaking up the status quo, kind of like where we started when I was providing context for this. I like that idea. Like that.
Yeah.
You haven't seen that done before, I just think that would be cool. So, I'm trying to like there wasn't anything made. I mean, like ER is a show that had a ton of. I mean, by the end of ER, I think the only original cast member left is Noah Wyle, and even by that point, I don't think he was a full cast member. I think he was kind of he only did like half a season or something.
I think you have dramas like that. I think it's pretty easy to just insert new characters and take old ones out. Because they got transferred to another hospital.
Yeah. Because and Law and Order is a similar thing too, where there were so many cast changes on Law and Order. It's on my list, but I was never going to sort of bring it up as a major example because, the idea of Law and Order isn't even really. It's all about the cases, and yeah, Detective Briscoe, played by Jerry Orbach, is awesome. Like him leaving was kind of a big deal just because he was on the show for so long that he left kind of just an indelible mark. But for the most part, yeah, it's like one season ends and maybe there's a new guy or there's a new girl. In the last 3 seasons, Jack McCoy, his character didn't leave, but he kind of wasn't doing the same thing anymore. He became like the district attorney. So rather than being like the guy in court, like getting the bad guys, like he was the boss character now, which I thought was an interesting change. But I'm a huge Law and Order fan, so I'm biased.
What about like The Wire? You know how they pretty much completely changed from season 1 to season 2, and then they went back later on.
That's a great example. Now, the Wire, I don't know. In the Wire's case, it's not like. Well, okay. In their case, basically what they did was just add a bunch of more characters, because pretty much everybody from season 1 is in season 2, but there's just now like 15 other people.
That's true.
To keep track of. And then what's funny is that then those 15 people basically go away and they're not really in the show anymore after that. Which I think is sort of a missed opportunity. But clearly, season 2 is sort of a closed off season. Like it sort of told the story they wanted it to tell, and then it's kind of done. And those characters don't really.
The people that aren't expecting that, it really throws you off because I just started watching The Wire one day. Years after it had already finished. Just always hear people say it's one of the best shows ever. And I was going through all of the HBO shows: Sopranos, The Wire, Oz, and you're just like, what the hell is going on? Who's that guy? What the hell?
Like when you watch season 2, like McNulty doesn't even get on the case. So there's if there's 13 episodes in the season, I don't think he actually gets back on the team until episode 10 or 11. It takes them that long to. Wow. And it's the thing is it's entirely organic. Like you have to sort of respect that the boss who hates him so much that he is not willing to get him off the Baltimore Harbor boat. Like that. But what I do think is funny too is that McNulty basically sets the season in motion. If you remember how season 2 begins, the only reason that they get saddled with this huge problem is because McNulty's on the boat, because there's a girl's body dumped, and where they find the body is when you look at they pull out there's and stuff. It's nope, that's in your territory. That is your murder. That's not going on my statistics. And so McNulty there's this montage of him in the office late at night. He pulls up maritime charts and wind patterns, and he then faxes it to the police agency that got the body dumped on them, and basically saying, well, the body was found in your territory, but basically they were killed in Baltimore City County or Baltimore County. Right. So that then they have to take the murder on. And he did it just to stick his thumb in that guy's eye. And I just think that that's really funny. Your guy who was your main character sort of last season, isn't your main character for the first 10 episodes, but he basically puts the whole thing in motion, just being kind of like a cock, which I just think is funny.
I could totally see guys in that position doing stuff like that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the feds and the local cops. They always butt heads.
Yeah.
Or the feds and the ATF. I was watching the show. I don't know if you've seen the show Evil Genius on Netflix yet.
No, but I've definitely heard of it.
Highly recommended. But anyway, they mentioned in that show, because it involves a lot of different things. Like ATF was there, the local cops were there, FBI was there, and they couldn't decide who had jurisdiction because, well, this is involved. Oh, well, this is involved, so somebody had to go ahead and, take the lead on it.
Yeah. It's, I'm trying to, the only other show that well, there's a couple shows that pop out at me. Smallville because Smallville had a lot of cast turnover over the course of the show. Like originally, one of the old Duke boys from Dukes of Hazzard was Clark's dad, and then that character passed away.
That was a sad episode, man.
That was a sad episode. That's actually it's funny. Smallville is a show that I quit on.
Yeah.
I stopped watching. I think after season 3, it was in the beginning of season 4. I was getting like pissed off, and so I stopped watching. I was like, I'm tired of every damn season. They just hit the reset button and everything's right back to normal, and nobody has changed or does anything different. So I got pissed off, and then season 4 was just terrible, so I stopped watching. But then in season 5, I kind of tentatively watched a few episodes, and actually was really digging it because James Marsters was a major guest star that season, playing Brainiac is what he turned out to be.
Right.
And they had this whole plot line with the state senate race with Lex Luthor and Clark's dad, and yeah, that was a really good episode, and lots of good stuff came out of that. I'm pretty sure I quit in season 6 again, and then I never really picked it up again.
When did Lois show up? Because I haven't watched that since that show was on TV.
Lois showed up at the beginning of season 4. And for that season, she was only in maybe half the episodes, kind of part-time. And then season 5 on, she was a main character. So there was a lot of cast turnover because Clark's friend Pete left. Eventually Clark's mom, she took the Senate seat that, Jonathan won. And then she just kind of wasn't on anymore. She was in Metropolis or somewhere else. I don't know. But kind of the big thing was that, Smallville was sort of pitched as, what if growing up, Clark Kent and Lex Luthor were friends? And so Michael Rosenbaum played Lex Luthor. And for as goofy as Smallville got, I do have to say, Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor was always really good.
Yeah.
He's just a really good actor with a lot of dimensions, and I always thought he had a difficult job because it seemed to me like the Lex Luthor he needed to play was a Lex Luthor who's not entirely evil. He's a guy who's had a tough, harsh upbringing, with his father, a lot of challenges, a lot of people stabbing him in the back and things like that, and so. He needs to sort of play a guy who wants to be good, but has this deep, it's easy for him to go low, when he should go high. And I just thought Michael Rosenbaum played that perfectly. But I think it was after season 7, if I'm remembering that right, that he left the show.
Really?
The season ends and Lex, I forget exactly what, I wasn't even watching it. So actually I don't quite even remember, but I do know that he sort of appeared in cameos in the subsequent seasons, not Michael Rosenbaum, you'd sort of see a bald guy from behind and realize Lex is alive. The thought was that he's dead, but it's Lex Luthor, he's not dead. And so show,
you're not missing anything. It was not good those last few seasons.
Yeah. Because they even brought in Doomsday was a villain, which seems odd. They brought.
He couldn't even fly. He didn't even have his suit yet. None of this stuff was around. That's what I wanted to see because I invested all this time. And the first few seasons of that show, I think, are really good.
Oh, yeah. 1 through 3 are pretty solid.
I'm I want to see this guy turn into Superman, and it should have happened, but it didn't.
Well, good. Well, Jay, you're in luck because if you watch the last 25 seconds, you can see him in his Superman suit from 200 yards away, saving an airplane.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
I know it that drove me crazy because I remember I actually did tune in to watch the finale. I wanted to see what happened, and I remember being glad that I hadn't been watching it because I was like, "This is fucking stupid."
It's you have someone writing a superhero show that has no concept of comics or something.
Right.
It's like you get a soap opera writer to write a comic book series, and that's what you get because it's.
Well, I do. The writers weren't good. So I don't want to throw them too much of a bone. But I do need to say that the WB, Warner Brothers, the owners of the DC Comics license, interfere a lot. There are things they just wouldn't let them do. the Smallville people wanted to bring Bruce Wayne onto the show, and they wouldn't let him. The WB was like, nope. Batman, he's in movies. That would confuse people if he's on the show and he's also in movies. No, you can't have him.
They were doing the Christian Bale films at that time, right?
Right. So that they would say stupid shit like that, and then like just other things. Like I think they were the ones that like were really, he can't have the suit because they were still remember they made that was it Superman Returns. And they were always kind of playing around with they're going to bring Superman back. It's like, no, he can't have the suit because it would be confusing if he's on TV and then he's also in the movies. Like the DC has this stupid thing. They did that too. And I don't know whether you were too old for this, but do you remember like the Justice League cartoon, Justice League Unlimited?
Yeah. I didn't watch it all a lot, but I knew it was around. Yeah.
Like that show, Justice League. Really great show, really great TV, like pretty sophisticated, I thought, for like a kid's show. I mean, like I watch it now and I get a lot out of it. And they like basically the network, or not the network, the WB kind of told them partway through the show, like, okay, you can't use any Batman characters anymore except for Batman. So you can't use Batgirl, you can't use Robin, you can't use Joker, can't use Riddler. And the reason that's important is because even though it's the Justice League, like they would do episodes sometimes like with the Injustice League or the Legion of Doom. And like the Riddler is a member of the Legion of Doom. And, Joker had tangled with the Justice League in some previous like seasons. And those are actually really good episodes, by the way. But they just said like, nope, because we're doing these Christian Bale Batman movies, like it'll confuse people. And in fact, if I remember correctly in some of the interviews I read, it was kind of a fight to get them to keep Batman, which it's nonsense. It's a kid's cartoon. Why would you say they can't use these characters in a cartoon that clearly has nothing to do with what this movie series is doing?
What was the argument for taking him out? Just because they were doing movies?
It's confusing, Jay. It's confusing that there's this Batman, but then there's a different Batman in the movies.
These stupid executives don't need to be making decisions like that. Is the problem?
I know that is the problem. At least in like the case of Marvel, the fighting and the limiting of characters is more like Kevin Feige being like, no, fuck you, I want that character. Like I'm gonna use him.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, oh, because that's the thing. Did Batgirl appear in the Christopher Nolan movies? Did Robin? I mean, he didn't. They tried to do something clever in The Dark Knight Rises, but like, did the Riddler? None of the characters that they were not letting them use even appeared in those movies. So what the fuck did it matter?
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, Jay, you got me worked up again. I'm joking.
Well, did you ever see the Aquaman show that was similar to Smallville?
Oh, you mean the pilot?
The pilot,
like the pilot they made?
Yeah.
I think I watched like a few minutes of it, and I just didn't think it was any good.
Who is it? Who is it playing Aquaman? I forget.
Oh, it's the guy who eventually was Green Arrow on
That's
Smallville.
Right.
Justin Hartley.
That's right. That's
right.
I didn't think it was a bad pilot, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, Aquaman's kind of a funny superhero anyway, which it'll be interesting to see what they do with this movie. But
I think Aquaman could be badass. Like, I think what they're doing in the movie is going to be good. And I think that how Justice League used him was really good. Like, they made him kind of like a big bearded, like, dude with a hook for a hand. He was a real badass. Like, I think there's a version of the character you can do that would be great. I do think that trying to do like a WB or CW version of, like, I just don't think, because he's in the, like, again, he's Aquaman. Like, it just seems to me like, I don't know how from a budget standpoint you can do that show well. You know what I mean? I mean, even Smallville, which could mostly kind of keep things on the surface, strained its budget sometimes. So I just don't, I don't know. But anyway.
It's what a wasted opportunity Smallville was. What a cool concept, man. Wouldn't you love to see the struggles that Clark Kent had? I mean,
yeah, and that's what.
Like, oh damn it, math class again, and that's a whole episode. You know,
Well, and that's why season, I think, 1 through, if I had to, I think Smallville season 2 and 3 are really their best, because season 1 fell into the monster of the week trap, and they just
Yeah.
were kind of lame monsters of the week. Whereas I think season 2 and 3 tried to do like bigger story arcs, and they still did have like Meteor Freak people show up, but I just thought season 2 like told some good like stories, and with some emotional grounding, and that had an impact on the characters, sort of. Just my frustration, my growing frustration was just that, Clark would experience something like transformative, and then the next episode it'd be like,
Yep.
well, I'm just out in the field, like nothing. It didn't seem like it changed all that much.
Yeah. Kind of ruined that guy's career too, didn't it? Forget his name, but
yeah, he was just on Lucifer, which was canceled. Really? Yeah, he was on that, but that was sort of like the first major thing he's done since then. I think he's been trying to do like writing and directing.
Yeah, I think he's kind of behind the scenes now.
Yeah, but I don't really know anything he did. In any case, all right, Jay. I think this is. I think when we start digging into the mythology of Smallville is when we call it quits, because I'm getting a headache just thinking about that show. And also, like, there's a whole piece we didn't even touch on about Chloe Sullivan apparently ran a sex cult in real life. So I don't even want to open up that can of worms. Maybe we can talk about that next time.
That's well, you heard it here, folks. Next week will be a Smallville complete dissection of the entire series.
But before we do go, I do need to say, Jay, I think you've got me excited about the concept of perhaps doing like a Lost watch along. And I think, you and I, behind the scenes, of course, let's probably a better way to figure out the details of that. But I think what we could try to do is something where, like, given how infrequently we've been able to do the show, I wonder if maybe we should try and do them in bunches. Like, okay, Jay, let's try and do like episodes 1 through 10 or something like that, and then we'll come back to the show and talk about what those episodes are. But
sure.
I love Lost, and I'm sorry that to date you haven't had a great experience with it. What I would hope is that my love of the show and the characters will bleed through the internet, and that you will feel what I feel. Because I take great pride in that I introduced a number of people, 10 at least, of people to Lost.
Yeah.
And they all greatly enjoyed it. And I think, like, my wife, when I introduced my wife to Lost, I'll just explain it briefly. Like, it was after season 1, but before season 2.
All right.
I basically said, "Oh my God," she wasn't my wife then, by the way. We were in college, but I was like, "My God, you have to watch this show." So I forget if I mailed it to her or if she just went and bought season 1 DVD. But she told me, she's like, she basically watched it for 2 days straight. She even skipped class.
Yeah. Oh,
like,
wow.
It's that like it grabs you that much. So I'm not sure why it hasn't worked for you in the past, but let's tackle that in the future, and let's maybe set something like that up, because I've actually been feeling like I could use some Lost in my life.
Absolutely.
Great show, and I think that would get me pretty excited. So, Jay, thank you as always. I think Orc was having some computer problems, so he dropped off. Maybe you and I will see him in the interwebs later with a little bit of Friday the 13th.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so I'll ping you guys about that. And then I see we still have 2 viewers. So Jerp Pin and whoever the other person is, I don't know, Jay, maybe that's you. If you have
not anymore.
Oh yeah, well, if you have PlayStation 4 and Friday 13th, we'll be on there, and hopefully the game doesn't break. That would just be a lovely.
That would be great.
Way to celebrate.
It works. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. All right, Jay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Awesome talk as always, and we will be in touch. Plateau TV Nation, all 1 of you, all 2 of you. Hopefully, you guys will check out the video after the fact. Please do, and let us know in the comments, what you guys think. But see you later, and have a good night.
Thanks, guys.